How's it going this morning, guys? Hope you're having a great weekend. I know I'm a little bit behind, but it looks like I got Shotgun Susie in here. I'm UA, so I'll do some push-ups afterwards. So let's get into it. It is Sunday, June 7th. I want to welcome everybody to my channel. The home of alternative legal education and contrarian views. And you'll notice that I've sort of been changing my format because I've really become a big fan of Mario over at Mineko64. And I really recommend that you you follow his channel and you really get into what he's talking about, because it'll really give you a well-rounded education about what's really going on with our economy, the central bankers, and their goal of worldwide government in stripping we the people of our assets. And this video today is going to be a sort of a mini jury trial against the COMEX, the CME, the Commodities Exchange. We're going to learn about how they were able to wrestle control of the physical price of gold and silver using paper markets to make them and their wealthy friends billionaires, and how they've used the private, secretly run Federal Reserve banking system as a tool to basically destroy our property rights. And in fact, many people don't know this, but bankers actually help fund the Bolshevik Revolution because their goal is to strip you and I of our assets. That's all they care about. They're very greedy individuals. And yes, the Federal Reserve Bank is a private, secretly run corporation, irrespective of the propaganda that you're taught in the Marxist-run leftist public education system in colleges. And we're going to get into that today. So today, we're going to call this loosely the people versus the Fed and COMEX. But in reality, it's going to be a conglomeration of civil as well as criminal law, where I break down the history of what happened based upon what the evidence will show. And I'm going to use a lot of Mario Mineko64's videos, and you're going to see the progression of Mario going from being, a little bit more portly over here, and then some of the newer videos where he's lost a lot of weight, been doing a lot of golfing. So it's just really fun to do YouTube shows. I've been doing this for several years now. I am a full-time practicing attorney, so it's not easy for me to do these shows by any stretch of the imagination. I don't really make money off these shows, but my wife asked me, why haven't you gone live? Well, because I've been preparing for trial. And she said, yeah, but you've got a bunch of new paid subscribers now. And I was like, oh shit, that's right. So I'm doing this for my paid subscribers. So all you people who are just along for the ride, thank my paid subscribers for this show, because I owe it to you. If you're going to pay for a membership, even though it's a couple bucks a month, I'm doing this for you. I could be working on briefs right now and be bringing in the bacon. But at the same token, I do love teaching, and I learn a lot by teaching and from teaching. So let me just really quickly look and see if there's any comments in here. So give me some 5x5 so I know you guys can hear me. It looks like I'm good to go. Oven Burn, good seeing you, man. Yeah, I know, Oven Burn. Oven Burn says, hey, Jody, good seeing you. Oven Burn says, I hate to sound like Peter Schiff, but he does have a good point. Yeah, Peter has an axe to grind. His father, Erwin Schiff, who I actually met before he was jailed, was heavily involved in the freedom movement. He wanted to abolish the Federal Reserve. He was daring the IRS and the feds, the private collection agency of the Federal Reserve, secretly run bank, the IRS, to show him where in the tax code private individuals had to pay an income tax, because we know that Supreme Court cases ruled that the 16th Amendment gave Congress no new taxing powers. And we know that income tax is supposed to be profit derived from capital. Any tax on your personal labor is theft. And that is my position. Unfortunately, like you, under threat of duress and jail, we're all forced to pay these income taxes. And that's how the Federal Reserve Bank makes their money, basically by fleecing we the people, and then loaning us money that they print out of nothing. They give it to banks, and the banks get this high interest from us. The Fed creates it from nothing. They send it out to their banks using fractional banking. And then we have to pay interest to borrow this money from them. So it's a pretty nice Ponzi scheme that they've set up. And we're going to get into the COMEX and how that all happened. Hey, CLIT Commander, good seeing you. Yeah, Shotgun Susie, more coffee, right on. Oven Burn loves bourbon in his coffee. Well, Oven Burn, you got to take it easy on that alcohol, man. I'm a real proponent of staying sugar and alcohol free and natural healing, natural medicine. So I've talked about that in some of my other videos about petroleum-based medicine and stuff like that. But in any event, let me see if I can get myself a little bigger here. There we go. All right. So you can see I got my S&W 500 out today. I got some kangaroos. Unfortunately, the lighting's not too good, but beautiful. Let me see if I can show you. Got a beautiful buffalo from Hero Bullion to show you. And remember, guys, if you don't hold it, you don't own it. So just keep that in mind. Make sure to keep on stacking, guys. Big, big deal. Make sure you keep on stacking. All right. So yeah, yeah, Oven Burn. So Peter Schiff, you know, his father died in federal prison. And so that's the other issue is you'll see that the government will silence anyone who doesn't want to go along with their program. And they use the public school system and the colleges, basically Marxist teachers unions to brainwash people into thinking that it's normal to strip your neighbor of their assets. And so we've talked about that on some of my other shows, and that's why I'm a proponent of homeschooling, getting your kids out of the Marxist run school system. Before I start the jury trial today, I just want to share with you something. So when we initially moved to this new area, my wife wanted to enroll our kids in the local public school because she thought, hey, we're not in communist Fornia anymore, so maybe it's going to be better here. So I knew we were going to have problems. The first day we pull into the parking lot, we see the teacher's parking lot, and sure enough, every other car has a bumper sticker. You're darn right, I'm a leftist, Obama, Biden. I mean, you guys got to know that the teachers unions are about 90% leftist, far left Marxists. And they definitely push their Marxist agenda on our kids. Critical race theory, teaching kids that white people are evil and colonizers and they're privileged and all this nonsense. It's all designed to create hate in order to keep us off of focusing on the stripping away of our assets by the Fed and by their buddies at like the COMEX. And so we'll get into that. Hey, good seeing you, Shotgun Susie. Yeah, we haven't started my case in chief this morning. But yeah, so if you want to learn, so ultimately, you know, the kids were coming home saying, yeah, Dad, they had us stand up in class today and all the white kids had to stand up and talk about why they're privileged. And of course, my kids are biracial. My wife's Salvadorian and I'm Swedish American, but I'm a proud American, inactive U.S. Marine. And I don't give a shit what your skin color is, what your background is. If you're willing to go to war and fight alongside me and die for me and drag my body home to my family if I pass, I don't care. But they don't teach that in the schools. They literally teach hatred. And you go on these college campuses, they teach the minorities that they need to have safe spaces because the colonizers and this and that. And it's all about creating class and race warfare. And so the whole next generation of public school kids, they're going to be the next politicians. So the upside is since they don't teach critical thinking in colleges and public schools, that you have a chance to homeschool your kids and get them out of that situation where you can give them a proper education and teach them about classical education, teach them about love of country and true capitalism, which is laissez-faire capitalism as enunciated in Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations. And so what we have modernly is crony capitalism. And so the narrative in the public schools and the colleges, because these bankers and politicians are terrified. So they've got to create an enemy. And so what better enemy than white people? Systemic racism is the reason. Boomers are the problem. But in reality, it's the Federal Reserve banking system, the federal income tax system, the slow stripping away of your property rights. And so we're going to talk about that today. Hey, Cheryl, good seeing you. Hopefully Cheryl is not a hostile. I do get a lot of anti-American communist Democrats who come on the channel who have been completely brainwashed by the college system and the public schools, who just hate me just because of the color of my skin. So I just want you guys to understand, I don't really care about all that stuff. What I care about is hopefully giving you some knowledge so you can think for yourself instead of being told what to think by CNN. And we're going to get into Bernays. We're going to get into propaganda. We're going to get into what happened in this trial today. So you'll understand how you've been systemically brainwashed. You guys want to talk about systemic racism. Well, we're going to talk today about systemic brainwashing by the educational industrial complex is part of this show. Thank you, Shotgun Susie. Shotgun Susie is one of my newest moderators, I believe. And if she's not, I'll have to promote her today. We'll do a promotion ceremony, give her a meritorious mass. What do you guys think? But let's get into the show, the case in chief. And the way we're going to start is to sort of explain to you how difficult it is to sue COMEX and the LBMA. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a background so you'll understand some of the terms, phrases, and meanings of things that I talk about. So the first thing I want you guys, and this is really important because see, the financial system is purposefully designed to keep you confused, to where only the smart people can understand it, right? Only the smart people can understand this. So therefore you're not qualified to talk about it and you just have to accept it. So because of my background, having become a lawyer the traditional way, being a blue collar guy, construction worker who came up through the ranks and became a lawyer on the law study program, I've worked in the so-called smart world, which is where I'm at today, and then the real world, which is where most of you guys in my audience are. Construction, plumbing, electrical. I used to be a contractor, sales, sold cars, sold health club memberships, got a well-rounded education. So I like helping people understand things that they can never learn from one of these so-called smart people. I mean, you go on some of these channels and they're talking about shorts and longs and margins, and you're just like, what the hell does that mean? So the first thing we're going to do is quickly, privates, is give you a rough education. And I believe in a layering it on approach, and I only expect you to retain about 5 to 10% of what I tell you today. And that's why I'm going to want you to save these videos to, like, there's a little ribbon on the video. Save these videos and play them when you're driving your car. Don't watch them, obviously. My videos are set up to where they can be pretty much all audio. A blind person could learn from these videos. And the idea is if you continue to listen to the things that I'm saying, in time, you're going to start to understand this stuff. And some of you already know this stuff. I mean, there's guys that are more educated, like Stacking Surfer or Sal over at Salivate Metals, or definitely Mario over at Mineco 64. But to me, you guys are all my recruits, right? And so you're going through recruit training right now. And I want to make sure that we don't go faster than our slowest man. So my training is that I want to make sure that everybody knows what to do. So if somebody falls, if Mario goes down or someone else goes down, you can pick up and you can take over where we left off. So margins are basically performance bonds in futures trading. So a gold or silver futures contract might be worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, but all you have to do is post an initial margin. In other words, you pay about 5 to 15% of what that stock value or what that silver or gold is actually worth. So it's pretty good for you. All right. And then that's how you open your position. So position basically is, you buy in. So now you have a position that shows up on your E-Trade account for those of you who use E-Trade. So it's not really a down payment. It's collateral to cover any potential daily losses. So if the price of gold and silver falls, or if it goes up a certain amount, you can cover that loss. And you may end up having to lose everything to cover that loss, but you have an upside that if you bought a short call and silver or gold goes down, you make money off it. If it goes up higher and you bought a long, you can make money off it. You can sell your position and take the fiat currency. Most people don't cash in. Hopefully you're understanding. It can be a bunch of ones if you understand so far. And if you have questions, ask me. And to the best of my abilities, I'll explain this. And again, I'm not a financial expert. I'm a lawyer. So my background is really more civil rights, legal history, but I have a natural law background. So all of this comes into play because a natural law person who supports natural law rights understands laissez-faire capitalism. And so that's why I'm a proponent of the Austrian School of Economics, which we'll get into a little bit later. But basically, it's collateral to cover any potential daily losses. So every day the exchange marks your position to the market. If the price moves against you, losses come out of your account. If your equity falls below the maintenance margin, a slightly lower threshold, you get the margin call and you have to deposit more cash. You have to give COMEX more money, basically. Or the broker is going to close your position. They'll automatically sell it, and whatever fiat currency comes in. So you may lose money, you may make 10 cents, right? And so you get the margin call, and then you're going to have to put more money in. Raising margins means that everyone holding those contracts suddenly needs to put up a lot more money overnight, or you lose your position. And so if you have hundreds of thousands of dollars, so what you're going to do is you're going to liquidate your other assets. You're going to sell off some of your gold and silver miners, for example, because you're all in the COMEX, because that's where the big money is. That's where all the big boys are. And that's what's been happening lately. When you have these sell-offs, that's what's causing the price of gold and silver to go down. And so COMEX knows how to manipulate the markets, and that's what they do. So basically, when they raise your margins, you're forced to liquidate other stocks and assets in order to cover those calls. So traders who can't or won't come up with the extra cash automatically get liquidated. Their longs or shorts get sold or bought back by the system. That forced selling adds one-way pressure to the market. And that's exactly how paper can hurt the physical market. And we're going to get into that in our trial today. So basically what's going on, guys, is it started with the Hunt brothers pretty much. It gave the bankers and all their wealthy friends like the Warburgs and the Rothschilds an opportunity to control the physical price with the paper markets. So even though you and I are buying physical gold and silver, there's no true what they call price discovery, because it's being controlled by COMEX, which is totally unfair. And so, but here's the upside. Believe it or not, our mortal enemy, the communist Chinese, they're actually starting to control the markets with physical price discovery. So it's just hilarious that the Marxists, they're more like a dictatorship, but the communist Chinese are actually going to probably put the LBMA and the COMEX out of business at some point. And you're going to see, this is why a lot of people are predicting $500 silver, $10,000 gold, because once the physical markets can no longer, the paper markets can no longer manipulate the physical markets, you're going to see true price discovery. You're going to have true capitalism, which we don't have now. Of course, they teach in the public schools that all capitalism is bad, that you need to be stripped of your assets so the government can decide what's fair, give welfare checks to their welfare check voters. And that's really what they do. It's all propaganda. All right. So when COMEX prices get slammed by margin-driven liquidations, bullion dealers and refiners base their buy-sell offers on that lower COMEX spot price. Physical buyers see cheaper paper prices and they hold off, right? Hold on one second. I want to make sure I got that right. Yeah, physical buyers see cheaper paper prices and hold off. Premiums collapse, right? Because they're seeing the premiums go down. So they're thinking, I'm going to buy in cheaper. Okay, you got that? And the miners or the sellers get paid less for real metal. So they're basically, the paper markets are interfering with companies like Hero Bullion, SD Bullion, who all could be potential plaintiffs in this fictitious lawsuit that we're going to discuss today. And by the way, if you want to get some great deals right now, I'm not sponsored by anyone. And I love Hero Bullion and SD Bullion because anybody who is into precious metals is automatically a friend of mine. SD Bullion has a phenomenal deal right now on their deals page for American Gold Eagles, mint certified American Gold Eagles. They're cheaper than what I could find for a brilliant uncirculated gold eagle on Hero. So I was pretty blown away. But Hero's got some phenomenal deals too. Very patriotic company. Definitely recommend you look at both. One of the advantages to me not having any sponsors is that I'm able to give you more of a well-rounded view. I'm not saying that I would turn turn them down, but I would have as part of my contract that I'm never going to just tell people to buy from you just because. I'm always going to maintain my independence, which is probably why I don't pick up too many sponsors. Okay. So basically what's going to happen is the physical buyers see cheaper paper prices and hold off. Premiums collapse and miners or sellers get paid less for that real metal. Okay. So that really hurts companies like Hero. Let's say Hero bought a wholesale price for some buffaloes and they paid $4,500 for them. And now today, because the paper markets manipulated the price, now it's down to 4,000. So they've got to find a way to cover their losses. And so it's a real struggle for these bullion dealers. And I do feel for them. It's by no means a get rich quick thing. It's a long game with these companies. And of course, you're taught in the public schools and the colleges that these people exploit the workers and they should have their assets taken from them because they're evil white racists or whatever. They just teach all this bullshit, right? So in any event, what will end up happening is the paper market's going to set that reference price. And this is where the overwhelming volume trades, this is where it's overwhelming to the volume trades. Hundreds of times more paper ounces change hands than physical metal moves. And so what that means is people don't actually call in their margins and try to buy the physical gold and silver. What they're trying to do is get some money or some fiat currency out of based on the price fluctuations, and they'll sell their option, they'll sell their shorts, they'll sell their long and maybe make a couple of $100,000 in that one trade, right? But the physical gold and silver still stays in the COMEX, right? So to me, like when I think about it, it's a total scam, and you're probably more confused than I am because I've got a little bit more of an understanding of how this works. But liquidity and leverage live in futures. So that's where the price discovery happens, and the physical market is going to follow that mostly, except until just recently with China and India starting to do their own physical trades. They're going to start taking over, and now we're going to actually have physical price discovery. And so, of course, the bankers are flipping out. They see fiat currency collapsing, and we see that with the war in Venezuela, trying to take out China and Iran and Venezuela. And of course, they're not our friends. I mean, they were flooding our country with terrorists. And in fact, China is actually behind a lot of this critical race theory stuff, trying to turn Americans against each other. They have a major stranglehold over our college system. And we know that they've been caught many times paying senators and congressmen off with gold and silver bars, trying to control the American political system. That's what they do. They're smart about it. They figure, well, we can pay off a bunch of corrupt politicians and we can control the agenda and make America communist without firing a shot. So in any event, as far as suing COMEX or the CME, the Commodities Exchange, under the Lanham Act, that's going to be a non-starter. The Lanham Act is about trademarks, false advertising, commercial speech that misleads consumers about goods and services. COMEX isn't actually selling you gold bars or advertising like fake metal. They run a regulated futures exchange. So changing margin requirements is a core risk management function that they're explicitly allowed to do, right? Because they were able to pay off politicians in order to get that. It's not false advertising, and tortious interference with business relations or prospective economic advantages also going to be a tough sell. You need to prove that the exchange intentionally targeted your specific business relationships with improper means, not just a change general rule that affected the whole market. Exchanges generally enjoy broad immunity for actions taken in their regulatory capacity, and the Commodities Exchange Act, the CFTC, gives the CFTC oversight. So private lawsuits are always going to face hurdles, preemption issues, and the fact that the margin policy is a legitimate tool, not some rogue sabotage, it's really tough. So they've really rigged it, in my opinion. People have tried suing over alleged manipulation, usually going after big banks for spoofing and concentrated shorts, not the exchange itself for settling margins. Those cases are brutal to win. The bottom line is the system is built this way on purpose. Leverage for liquidity, centralized clearing for safety, and the exchange gets to adjust those dials when volatility spikes. Whether that setup is healthy for physical metals is a whole other debate, and obviously we don't think it's healthy, but it's legally well insulated, okay? So that's the segue into our show today. So here, so let me just take a look and make sure there's not any questions before we start the show. Hey, Rocky Superstar, good seeing you. It certainly hurts. It hurts all of us. The only people who win are the private, secretly run Federal Reserve banking system, which we're going to talk about, and it helps all their buddies in the markets, all their wealthy billionaire, trillionaire friends. It helps people like BlackRock. It doesn't help us, but they don't want to help us. Remember, the World Economic Forum, which is where all these guys hang out, think that you and I are just useless eaters. And now with humanoid robots and Bill Gates and his so-called safe and effective stuff, where he's actually made speeches, if we can just do a good enough job with these safe and effective things, we can reduce the population even more, right? Engineering mosquitoes to come and bite us, to inject us with these safe and effective things against our will, which is a battery, which is illegal and unlawful. But what are you going to do? How are you going to enforce it? How are you going to prove it? Okay. So I'm just going to roll up here and just look at some questions. So CLIT commander said John Felix did a video about property taxes and called to pay them. He asked where he gets to own his paid off home. And as he got into it with them, they hung up. Of course. Yeah, that's of course. Cheryl Clark says, breaks my heart, those innocent kids. Oh, me too. It's terrible. Yeah, you're in boot camp, CLIT commander. Drop and get me 20 there. You hurry up. All right. And by the way, good morning, Rocky Superstar. Now, TT Garland says, I don't see how China can be looked at as being more tyrannical than the U.S. Well, I think you're probably right about that. I mean, we're copying the communist Chinese system. So, yeah, I mean, our politicians are learning quick that they'd rather have central control than afford us natural law rights, which is what our founding fathers intended for us. But I'm always going to be Team USA, okay? So just look at it this way. Even though I don't like everybody on my team, I'm still Team USA. So you can sit here and trash the USA, and I'm not saying that you are, but I still believe that people like you and I can create parallel systems. We can trade with each other. We can help each other prep. We can help pass on our homeschooling programs, get our kids out of these communist-run schools, these Marxist teachers unions who hate America and who teach hatred against white people, who teach boys that they're really girls, and start teaching our kids common sense. So that's really my take on it. Give me a bunch of ones if you agree. So, and T.T. Garland, I never said that communist China started critical race theory, but certainly Marxists did. Critical race theory comes from what's called critical theory, which was something that was started in the American university system by far-left college professors, and they taught class warfare. But Americans, because they all want to have a shot at making wealth, didn't like that because they thought, well, if we shut down wealth, if we shut down the ability to get rich, we don't like that. So it was morphed into critical race theory, where they started teaching hatred of white people. And that sells really well, especially among minorities who have been taught since birth that they're victims of the oppressors, you know, because I'm an oppressor, apparently, because of the color of my skin, right? Reverse racism, basically. And so that is selling, and that's what's being pushed in the Marxist-run education system. So what we're going to do now is we're going to get into the case in chief, but it looks like I've been able to answer most of the questions here. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the sovereign American people watching live from coast to coast and around the world, welcome to the home of alternative legal education and contrarian views, as Mario would say over at Mineco 64. Today, in this people's court, we put the Federal Reserve and COMEX on trial for what may be the greatest financial crime in modern history: systemic price manipulation, theft of your wealth through fiat debasement and confiscation, regulatory capture, and the deliberate betrayal of natural law rights to life, liberty, and property. From an Austrian economic lens, central banking is the root of boom-bust cycles, moral hazard, and hidden inflation theft. Today, I will expose the centuries-long war on silver, the regulatory takedown of the Hunt brothers, Roosevelt's gold nationalization, which many of you call confiscation, but it really wasn't confiscation, it was nationalized. Basically, he used an executive order to strip us of our gold and then to reprice it in order to pay back his New Deal. Of course, that's the problem with socialism. Everybody says he saved America by the New Deal. All he really did was steal our money to pay back his welfare check voters from an economic collapse that was caused by the very central bankers that put him into power. Basically a card game, a shuffling of wealth. Like Obama said, you didn't build that, someone else built that, right? As if our founding fathers and our family members who left us an inheritance means that since we didn't build it, we need to pay for it again. And that's their philosophy. Okay, so we're going to talk about the communist infiltration of our institutions, the war on critical thinking in public schools, and how economic entanglement with communist China as the new world leader is actively turning America into a digital collectivist state, rejecting everything our founding fathers fought and died for. This is not theory. This is documented evidence. The verdict belongs to you, the people. Let the trial begin. First thing we're going to talk about is the Fed on trial, the Austrian perspective. And this has to do with the Austrian School of Economics. So I submit to you that the evidence will show that the Federal Reserve is a private banking cartel masquerading as a government institution that manipulates our currency supply. Notice that I don't say money because it's not money. These are debt instruments. So they manipulate our currency supply and supply interest rates, creating artificial credit booms, followed by inevitable busts, exactly as von Mises and Hayek from the Austrian School of Economics warned us. I have direct evidence on this, and so what we're going to do is we're going to start with our first video where I call my expert witness, Mario, over at Mineco64, and you can tell he was a little bit more portly back then, but I love this guy. Now, I may play the same videos several times in the show because it supports my position as the plaintiff's attorney or the prosecutor. But the first one we're going to play. And by the way, all of the links to these videos are in the description, and I invite you to do your own research. Again, my goal here isn't to have you think like me. It's to have you think, because you've been brainwashed in the public school systems and the Marxist-run colleges and universities you've already been brainwashed, most of you, especially if you have a college degree. So it's very difficult for you to break out of that. Very similar to the Hitler Youth in Nazi Germany. And we'll talk about that because that same Prussian education system was imported to our country by the Rockefellers in order to do just that, to make you non-critical thinkers, to make you believe anything that Obama tells you or some politician tells you is reality, or some CNN broadcaster tells you. And that's Bernays, by the way, and we're going to talk about that. But let's get into the first video, and I'm going to let Mario do the talking.
Who are saying they have plenty of silver, but the anecdotal evidence from the public at large tells us otherwise. John, thank you for being on my channel. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Mario. Thank you for the invitation. And thing is, like a lot of conversation about silver and the Perth Mint. But obviously, one of the other things we're going to cover today, which is the Reserve Bank of Australia and its gold holdings in the Bank of England.
Yeah, that's how I found out about you. I think it was maybe 3 years ago you started speaking about that.
2018.
Yeah, and it got me really interested because I've known for many years from following people like Bill Murphy at GATA. I started following GATA like in 02, 03, because even back then when I was still working in the city, I didn't trade gold for my clients, but I started looking at gold because I bought a few coins back in 02, and then I started noticing that the markets seemed to do the same thing at the same time every day, which I'd never seen before. Being in the markets for over 10 years, I never saw markets trading like that.
Yeah, and so for those of you who don't know, believe it or not, if you look at him, he looks so different now. You can see Mario was a little bit more portly back then, but I'm calling Mario as my expert witness today, and he's talking about his evolution and what he's noticed, because he was a trader in Switzerland, and he's talking about things that he saw that just didn't make sense in the markets. specifically in this video, he's talking about the COMEX and the physical demand for silver. In other words, China in particular wants to buy as much gold and silver as they can. And since the COMEX has been keeping the price suppressed so they can keep the gold and silver in their vaults and keep leasing it out and keep doing margin calls against it and make trillions of dollars, right? Why would they ever want to let it get sold? And so he was seeing this price manipulation. And this is a little bit older of a video. It's in the video description, but just listen to what he's got to say. It's very interesting.
And I started looking into it. And one of the big instruments of the control or suppression, manipulation of the price of precious metals is the fact that the central banks lease out a lot of the gold that they hold to people like the bullion banks or even to the Perth Mint.
So this is how stupid this is, guys. All right. So these assholes will take some gold that you have, right? And it's called hypothecation. So let's say they have 1 ounce of gold. All right. So let's say they've got this kangaroo. All right. Got 1 ounce. So because I have special permission from the government to do this, I can lease this gold out to you, right? That's called hypothecation. And then you can trade against it. All right. This is how ridiculous this is. I mean, it should be illegal. All right. So what they'll do, hopefully it won't fall over. All right. By the way, you guys like my S&W 500? That's my bear gun. So if I'm ever in Alaska, that's a 50 caliber pistol right there. I can do some damage to a bear and protect my wife and kids. All right. So, but that's not all they can do. They can take the same 1 ounce piece of gold and they can rehypothecate it. So they can lease that piece of gold out to like 500 people if they want. The same piece of gold. As long as nobody calls in the margin to make a physical purchase, they make billions and trillions of dollars. That's what he's talking about leasing. This is how stupid this is. But I know from my experience lobbying Congress on behalf of cruise ship rape victims and having helped draft the Cruise Ship Safety Act, the second one, that these politicians, all they care about is money. All they care about is their reelections. I mean, they'll spend millions of dollars from their donors to get reelected. And that's how they do their Fox News or CNN ads, their Instagram ads, their Facebook ads for their reelection campaigns. They spend about 90% of the time in office trying to get reelected. And so they pander to people like the COMEX and Larry Fink over at BlackRock in order to get money to get reelected. So of course they're beholden to guys like Soros and all these guys, right? No, whatever side they're on. And if I'm a congressman and I want to support the Cruise Ship Safety Act because one of the constituents in my district was sexually assaulted on a cruise ship, but I want to help the cruise industry, I'll just say, well, I have to vote against it. But my buddy down the hall, the Democrat, he doesn't have any victims in his district. So here's what I'm going to do. Give me 50 grand and then I'll give you a good word with him or her, and you go down the hall and they'll vote against it. And that way I can show that I voted for it and get reelected. That's how it really works, guys. I've been there while they're making the sausage. I could immediately feel it was very uncomfortable dealing with these people. It's like they're completely brainwashed, filled with the devil. It's like they're just so hyper focused on reelection. And of course, we know that they all make millions of dollars in the stock market. They allegedly, because Wikipedia says so, they're not allowed to do insider trading. Yeah, if you believe that, I got a bridge to sell you. The same people who passed the legislation to help fund these corporations and set up these non-governmental organizations with your tax dollars, they know beforehand what companies are going to go public, what companies are going to make money, and you'll see that they invest in these companies before they do, and they make millions on shorts and longs. So, and that's another video that we'll talk about later. But I just wanted you to understand what leasing means, because it's very important that you understand that 1 ounce piece of gold could be leased out with hypothecation and rehypothecation to hundreds of people, the same piece of gold. Tell me that you think that's fair, and I'll tell you that you're an idiot to your face. All right, let's get back into the video.
Like you found out.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and So can we go over what's going on at the Perth Mint as it pertains to silver, what you've seen and what you've heard from people? And
Sure.
yeah.
Sure. Yes. So probably around late February, I was hearing anecdotal stories of people who I know in Perth. So I live in on the east coast of Australia, and Perth is on the west coast of Australia for some of your international audience. And I was just hearing stories of people walking into the Perth Mint, retail customers late February, and they basically were being told there is no silver for sale for the general public. Then I heard, so I'm with As Good as Gold Australia. We are South Australia's largest bullion retail dealership. We are actually an accredited distributor for the Perth Mint, and starting in March, we were told we that we cannot place an order on the.
All right, so basically you get the idea. All right, the mints are saying there's no silver available. Well, come on. We know that that the silver that's kept with the COMEX is being leased to other people, and that they want to keep it in their vaults. But we know now that China is calling in these margins. They're buying it. They want it, and they're able to buy it for much cheaper because the paper markets in America are artificially keeping the price down. There's no true what they call price discovery. And so because of this, the evidence shows that fiat inflation acts as a hidden tax, stealing your purchasing power while enriching the elite. And so every time so this is a little bit different of a topic, but every time the government prints money, okay, it's not money, it's currency. Every time the government turns on their printing machine, that artificially increases the currency supply. And that's what causes inflation. But you're told in the colleges and the public schools, it's really these evil white people, boomers, Gen Xers. They're the reason why we have inflation. They're greedy because they had the wherewithal to buy a home back when people could actually afford one. And so ultimately, the elites will try and turn it around and blame it on people like you and I, who are basically just struggling to pay our taxes. And they'll try to turn minorities against us, flood the country with illegal aliens from low IQ countries, socialist countries, who they already are pre-programmed that the government's supposed to take care of them from cradle to grave. In other words, destroying the concept of rugged individualism that our founding fathers wanted, and what actually made America great for its first 150 years, when we had no income tax and we could pay for all of our roads. We could pay for everything. All right. And what changed all that is when the bankers started loaning out more money than they had, which was your money, and then people made a run on the banks. And so rather than throwing these bankers in jail, the government went ahead and passed laws to help them. Well, why is that? Well, because those bankers are the ones who used your money to pay off these politicians to get them reelected. That's, in a nutshell, what really happened. And so based on this video, the evidence basically has shown that the Keynesian doctrine taught in public schools and universities has turned economics degree members of Congress into tools defending the cartel. People talk about, well, AOC, she's not dumb. She has an economics degree. Guys, she has an economics degree in Keynesian economics, okay? Keynes is the problem, all right? These are the ones who support the idea of fractional banking, money printing. It's stupid. That people have been brainwashed and conditioned in this country into thinking that if you have a degree from one of these far left universities or public school system, educational industrial complex, medical school, whatever, that anyone else is alternative, right? That they frame it as everyone else is an alternative conspiracy theorist, right? That's what, so Rockefeller takes over our medical industrial complex, creates a medical industrial complex, using petroleum-based medicine, selling the waste products from the oil industry to create artificial cures from the thousands of years of hypothecary and botanical medicine, so we could patent it. And then it cost billions and billions of dollars to get these patents approved by his friends over at the FDA and the CDC. And of course, all the heads who were appointed to these organizations are former CEOs of big pharma. It's the fix is in, guys. And if you don't watch shows like mine, you're not going to learn the truth. So based upon this, the evidence shows as well that the Supreme Court has called the Federal Reserve a uniquely structured quasi-private entity, but there's no express constitutional provision authorizing a central bank with these powers. None. There is no constitutional provision authorizing a central bank to exist. Okay, so I just want you to understand that that's how they've been able to maintain control. And of course, by keeping you brainwashed with the educational industrial complex that was imported here by Rockefeller, you're never going to know unless you learn from shows like mine. So the next thing we're going to talk about is what happened recently at the Supreme Court. Okay, so you saw that Trump wanted to fire one of these Federal Reserve employees because she, based on public record, she lied on a mortgage application, and it's public record. I mean, as a lawyer, I can tell you it's false information. Okay, it was false. But he tried to fire her as a federal employee, and the Supreme Court basically pushed back because no, the Federal Reserve is not a government organization. It is a private company. That's what it is. And so there's no way that the president can fire someone who is a private employee. And that's really what this boiled down to. Of course, they came up with all these arguments that wouldn't have applied in any other case. I mean, the federal employees serve at the pleasure of the president. The president could fire him for pretty much any reason. So, and we'll talk about that in another video. But let me just let me go through the next video here so you can sort of get an understanding of what's going on here with the Federal Reserve. All right, you guys ready? Let's do it.
Unique structure, and they're referred to them as a quasi-private entity, which is true. I mean, the Fed was established by Congress, but there are 12 regional reserve banks that are run by private boards of directors. The Fed board, that is the officials that presumably this ruling would apply to, they are nominated by the president and confirmed by the Senate, but the law says they can't be removed. They can only be removed for cause. So there was some question about whether the president had the power to remove them. The Fed has previously said, and presumably have had their lawyers look very closely at this, that they can't be fired. So the Supreme Court seems to have agreed with that position today.
So even if the Fed is insulated, knowing that this legal fight still has to play out in full, the justices aren't necessarily saying that the president definitively has this power. They're just allowing him to exercise it for now as these other court challenges play out. Are there implications for other agencies beyond the Fed, other regulators?
It certainly seems that way. I mean, as you said, it's a stay. It's a temporary decision. We'll have to see what the final outcome is. We saw that there were a few liberal justices that dissented from this, but clearly the direction that the court is headed seems to be that they're somewhat sympathetic to this argument that the president has this power. But that's the worry, right? That this could have much farther-reaching implications than just for these two agencies.
All right, so you sort of get the gist of it, right? So let me see if there are any questions for it. Yeah, so Shotgun Susie, much like a drug cartel, only worse. Well, yeah, because it's sanctioned by the government. It's basically what would amount to criminal activity for anyone else sanctioned by the government. But you can see clearly that they try to use terms of art like quasi-public, quasi-private. So the way it works is in 1913, under cover of darkness on a Christmas, when most of members of Congress were gone, based upon an agreement between all these big bankers and wealthy people with these politicians who were in their hip pocket. In 1913, the Federal Reserve Act started the process of creating the travesty of the Federal Reserve banking system. And ever since the creation of that system, the dollar has lost at least 96% of its purchasing power. Okay. And that's the truth. And that's irrefutable evidence. So that's what the evidence shows. So you can believe what you want to believe. If you're brainwashed by the public education system, it'll be difficult for you to understand this because your head will explode, because you're incapable of critical thinking, because you've been programmed by the Prussian education system that was imported here by those same bankers, by those same multimillionaire monopolists, to create a nation of workers and not of thinkers. So your head will explode when I tell you these things, and your Marxist college professor will say that I'm a wacko or I'm a crazy person. Well, I'm just a lawyer presenting evidence. I encourage you to do your own research. But the evidence shows that the core fraud in the entire central banking and COMEX system revolves around allocated versus unallocated metal. Okay, so they're all interconnected, and that's why I'm sort of talking about COMEX and the Fed interchangeably, because they're all buddies. So let's get into that a little bit. Let's talk about allocated versus unallocated metal. I'm just trying to find the actual video on that one. And so just give me 1 second, guys. I'm still kind of learning this stuff. All right, let's get into it.
The paper game.
The final trading days of the year are setting up to be far more critical than most investors expect. With only a handful of sessions left before year-end, liquidity will be thin, participation uneven, and price moves potentially exaggerated. That kind of environment often produces sharp, emotional moves, especially when markets are already under structural pressure. Mario Ineco, a longtime market observer focused on physical metals and market structure, believes gold is now positioned to play catch-up with silver. While silver has led the breakout, gold remains deeply undervalued relative to the scale of monetary expansion and paper positioning.
That's
the
right.
COMEX LBMA pricing system, built on leverage and paper claims, is showing visible strain as physical demand quietly tightens. As control over the paper market weakens, even a normally quiet week could deliver outsized price action. The setup into the new year suggests gold may finally join the move more decisively. Now we
Right, but we've seen that COMEX and the LBMA, the London Bullion Metals Exchange, they're doing everything they can to prevent that from happening. But they have no problem selling all of our gold and silver and precious metals to China, okay? And we're going to talk about why that might be later on in this trial today. But let's go ahead and, even though this is sort of a spin-off on one of Mario's videos, it still sort of explains what's going on.
present the clips from Mario Ineco's interview. Before we continue to discuss this, please subscribe to our channel.
Yeah, please subscribe to my channel.
LBMA Axis, they're losing control of the paper game. The other thing that I think is happening is that the people inflicting pain on this paper game is a mixture of institutions and sovereign countries.
Right.
We're going to look into that as well. And I'm also going to tell you what that will mean for the dollar as the major or premier reserve asset. Yeah, I think it's very important. Not just.
And by the way, I don't know if you guys noticed, but a few days ago, it was announced that gold just replaced fiat currency as the world's reserve asset again. And that's obviously for a reason. China and these other countries don't want to buy our debt anymore. China used to hold $1.3 billion of our debt, and now I think it's $600 billion, and they're slowly getting rid of our bonds. And that's how the Federal Reserve keeps this scam up, is by selling our bonds to other people, other countries, as well as you, and forcing the taxpayers to pay the interest. That's why they like to raise interest rates, because then it returns a higher yield on the bonds. And so the people think they're making a killing because, hey, I'm getting a 5% return on this bond. And of course, the government statistics on what real inflation is much lower than it really is. I would say it's more around 12 to 13%. But when they tell you it's only 3 or 4%, you think, hey, I'm making money because I'm getting a 5% return. But your fiat currency is still being debased and devalued. You're not really making anything. You're just losing less. Whereas if you were to buy gold or something like that, you would be able to maintain the value. For example, a $20 gold piece back in 1913 or 1933, when President Roosevelt basically nationalized our gold and made it illegal for you and I to own gold so we could pay back all of his socialist programs by revaluing it and selling it, which I think is totally unconstitutional. A $20 gold piece could have bought you a fine Italian suit, a fine pair of shoes, several fine meals at an Italian restaurant, probably several fine bottles of Italian wine. And that same $20 gold piece today is worth about $4,300 or $4,400 in today's market. So $20 back then is now of equal value of around close to $5,000. And it can still basically buy you the same thing. And so that's what gold does. It's not a get rich quick thing. And we're going to shake out a lot of those weak hands over the next few weeks of people who thought it was. And once that happens, gold's going to take off again. But it's not really taking off. It's basically just beating the rate of inflation, because as currency value goes down, it looks like gold is going up, but it's not really going up. It's just maintaining its value, and that's its purpose. Okay, guys? And so when you think, oh, but I can get a dividend from stocks and make even more if I invest in something that's called a yielding asset. But why do you really think you're making anything? All that yielding asset is doing is it has the appearance that your stocks are going up in value, but in reality, they're basically almost keeping up with the rate of inflation, unless you're a member of Congress or one of these insiders who's able to buy the stock early enough to where it gives you a super high return, right? Because you have insider knowledge, which is supposed to be illegal. But for some reason, nothing ever happens to these guys. So let's go ahead and get back in and let Mario talk some more.
Gold, but silver as well. People forget that up until the mid 60s, late 60s, silver was the major day-to-day, let's say, money and currency of commerce, small transactions. Gold has always been the money and currency for bigger ticket transactions, more for long-term savings, endless supply of paper silver on LBMA and COMEX. That has basically destroyed or kept the silver mining industry at bay. So for the last 5, maybe now 6 years, there's going to be a silver deficit.
That's right.
And it takes a long time, 5 to 10 years to...
So remember that silver is like a byproduct of mining for things like copper and gold. There's really not that many true silver mines. And so there's not much above ground physical silver available. Okay, is this making sense? And when COMEX keeps on artificially keeping the true price discovery of silver down, it makes it too expensive for exploration companies, et cetera, to go and try to find more silver. And so there's going to be a huge silver deficit. And so now China and these other countries, especially the United States, who just declared silver to be a strategic asset, they need this silver. And so they're gonna start buying it up, and they're gonna call in. They're gonna start calling it. They're gonna call in all these margin calls, shorts and longs, to try to take possession, and that's going to drain the physical supply out of COMEX. The problem is it's all going to China, and we're not going to have anything left. And so our own government is basically allowing these big billionaire companies who basically operate with license to violate our natural law rights, in my opinion, to basically bankrupt America and to keep us and basically make us into a third world country. I think we're headed for something that's greater than the Great Depression if we, the people, don't start forming parallel systems like the Amish did or have done, or like Martin Luther King Jr. did. If we don't start forming parallel systems and we just keep on allowing this to happen, we're doomed. So that's why I'm an advocate of prepping, homeschooling, stacking, and forming relationships with like-minded individuals who are still capable of critical thinking. And look, guys, make no mistake about it. This next generation of kids who have been brainwashed with critical race theory and transgenderism ideology, they're the next politicians, guys. They will vote to strip you of all of your assets. And your only chance is to homeschool your kids and form parallel systems of traitors and like-minded patriots. Otherwise, you will be part of this digital capture where your social credit score will dictate whether or not you can leave your home. And communist China is going to make sure that happens because they will be the next superpower. And in order to trade with them, they will demand that our government restrict our First Amendment rights. You're not allowed to say anything bad about the government. We saw with the Biden administration, they did their dry run by restricting anybody's social media accounts and basically preventing them from talking about vaccine side effects. People would have their accounts banned. And now we know from the Twitter files that that's exactly what happened. We had the federal government basically threatening these social media companies. And it was no big threat because the social media companies, Silicon Valley, they're all a bunch of leftists anyways. So basically shutting people down and silencing them. And China wants to see that our government will do that. In fact, Google helped them build their spy networks, their social media, social credit networks, where they'll just issue you a ticket for jaywalking because they caught you on a camera, right? No due process, no trial. You'll just get a ticket. And if you don't pay it, when you try to leave your apartment, high-rise complex, your 15-minute city, which they're trying to build here in the United States, in particular in California and Canada as well, you will be denied the right to leave your apartment building until you pay that fine. And that's where we're headed. Well, let's let Mineko keep on talking.
Develop a producing mind, and therein lies the problem. And what we have now as well is, aside from all the industrial demand, all the talk of this new solid state battery by Samsung, and more need for silver for everything else as well in this electrified world, and the fact that China is putting export controls from the 1st of January 2026, and China is the second biggest producer. That's a big reason why people are rushing to get physical.
Well, people who are smart are rushing to get physical because they're intelligent enough to know that the government has proven time and time again that they're not your friend, and that the only chance you have is to save yourself and your family. And that's what our founding fathers were all about. This was supposed to be a constitutional republic that protected individual rights, not the collective. That's what they teach you in the colleges, that the collective matters more than the individual. In fact, socialism is directly against individual rights, liberty, and freedom. George Bernard Shaw talks about that. So if you support socialism, you support everything that our founding fathers did not support. Our government is supposed to be bound by the chains of the Constitution and by the Bill of Rights. And so that's why they always try to denigrate our founding fathers, that they're racist, they had slaves. This is what they teach in the schools, because they want people to not support the concept of freedom and liberty. They want people to believe that the government is the answer. And that plays right into the hands of communist China, who, by use of their Confucian societies and prior to them, with the KGB infiltrating Hollywood, the Soviet Union's KGB infiltrating Hollywood in our public schools and colleges, did in our doing. And so they basically put a lockdown on the education of the American people to prepare us for the Marxist totalitarian system that they want. And of course, in a Marxist totalitarian system, you basically have a caste system where you have the high party leaders who need to have the expensive cars, who need to have the expensive houses, who need to have all these extra things because they speak for the people, right? And they brainwash people into thinking that that's normal. So I think we've given Mario enough of an opportunity to sort of explain what he's thinking here. So the next thing we're going to get into is we're going to talk about allocated versus unallocated gold and silver, so you get an idea of what this means. So in COMEX, they have allocated versus unallocated silver, for example. So allocated means a specific identifiable bar, and of course it has to be assayed. So a professional assayer has to go in and guarantee its purity, and then it's kept in their vault. So when you take it out, it has to be reassayed and reevaluated. So that costs a lot of money. So people don't like to pull their stuff out of there because it costs them more in currency to get that reevaluated. So that is physically set aside in a vault with your name on it. You have a direct property claim on that particular serial numbered bar. So that's the way that works, okay? Now, unallocated means you own only a general undivided promise or a claim on a pool of metal, not specific bars. And this is fractional reserve banking in disguise, okay? Fractional reserve banking in disguise. And let me just see if I can find that video really quick. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna go ahead and let King Kong talk about it, because this is really amazing stuff. This is gonna blow your mind, guys. We're on a journey together learning, okay? And I want you to pop in if you see something that I missed, but this is going to blow your mind.
Reserve, like trading in the metals, and also price suppression. And with that, I couldn't think of a better person to have on than Eric Young, aka King Kong 9888. Eric, welcome back.
Thanks, Mario. It's a pleasure to be on the show again.
Hey everybody, welcome She Stacks to my channel really quick. I just see that She Stacks 86 just joined me. She's got a new channel. I really like her style. I recommend that you you like and subscribe to her. In fact, let me see if I can do something real quick. I'm going to go ahead and add She Stacks as a moderator. She Stacks, please go ahead and drop your link for these guys. Today, I came on a little bit early. As you can see, I've got close to 60,000 subs. Today, I think we've only got about 20 people on the chat, but most of the people will watch these videos later who are my channel people because they're all over the world. And so I'm sure you'll pick up some subs today from this She Stacks, and would definitely love to have you on. By the way, thank you, Lack the Silver Stacker. And I agree with you about these direct energy weapons. I think there's a lot of stuff going on here that doesn't pass the smell test. So yeah, and Shotgun Suzu, I don't even want to talk about the jab because every time I do, I get my channel banned. And that's how you know how bad it is. When the social media and these big corporations get so much advertising money from pharma and the bankers that you're silenced and you can't even talk about what the evidence shows. Even as an attorney, if I present evidence that's irrefutable, I'll be banned. I could read the side effects off the side of a bottle and I can be banned for medical misinformation. So you got to be really careful what you say, unfortunately. And that's why I recommend that we form parallel systems where we can talk about things outside of places like YouTube and Instagram, where we can actually have free speech and really say what's really going on. But let's go ahead and let Mario and King Kong finish off here.
Yeah, and it's always a pleasure to speak with you, Eric. And my first question, do you agree with my conclusion there about what silver prices are telling us? I hear from you that we've just traded above 100 on the Shanghai Gold Exchange, and we traded up to 91 on the Western spot market overnight.
Yeah, so right now I'm looking at the, I have it on my X account. You can share with your audience. The PM benchmark price for the SGE for silver is at, and I show the calculations as well because they quoted in RMB yen per kilogram. So I converted the price to US dollars per troy ounce. So it's the equivalent of 101.5587 US dollars per troy ounce. So, I mean, this is historical because this is like 3-digit silver. It's above $100 in Shanghai.
In other words, the evidence shows that when the public demands real physical delivery, allocated metal, we just talked about allocated versus unallocated, the entire paper market suppression scheme collapses, which is exactly why China is draining physical gold and silver. And they're actually forcing true price discovery. Do you guys get this so far? China is actually behind forcing true price discovery. So our communist enemy is actually more laissez-faire capitalist than we are. That is how far Marxist and how far central control our government has gone. I mean, even bullion in the United Kingdom, they don't charge a capital gains tax on that because it's real money. But in America, they do. You've got to pay a capital gains tax on your gold and silver when you sell it, which is ridiculous because you're paying a capital gain on the currency debasement. Every time the Federal Reserve creates fiat currency through quantitative easing, that reduces the value of the dollar, which makes prices go up for things like gold and silver. And so you're forced to pay a capital gains tax on the debasement by our own government of that currency. You're paying them for their mismanagement of our economy. It's just unbelievable to me that people allow this to happen.
China, at the SGE, which is by the way, that's the physical silver price.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And ex VAT, right? Because we have a lot of naysayers out there who have criticized you for not being an expert. But all these naysayers and supposed experts,
right? And so all the naysayers and experts are all people who went to government curriculum schools where they teach Keynesian economics, which is basically a propaganda ministry for the Federal Reserve fiat currency system. And that's another problem that I have with our so-called education system, is they teach these college kids. That's why the government wants to give everybody a free education, because it's a propaganda ministry where they brainwash the next generation of leaders to believe in this system that was propped up by billionaire, trillionaire bankers who do not support individual rights and who actually help fund the Bolshevik Revolution. A lot of people don't understand this, is that these bankers are actually behind forcing this centralized control government, and they use the education system to do that. Let's go ahead and let Mario talk more. And I really love Mario's channel. I think the guy is, like, to me, he's like a breath of fresh air. I'm surprised that he hasn't been banned, but I think it's because of the way he comes across. He knows enough to not say the things that are going to get him banned.
I mean, they have egg on their face, in my opinion. And I'm not going to mention names, Eric. And before we continue with silver, I just wanted to have a quick word with the viewers. And a lot of you know that I was offered a board membership for this company, Chancery Royalty. It's a very new royalty company. They're going through pre-IPO equity raising. I'm going to put a link below in the description if you want to look into this company. Of course, mining is very speculative, so I would add that. But the other thing I wanted to announce, Eric, and it's really something I wasn't expecting, is that I'm going to Ethiopia next month with the CEO of Chancery Royalty. And we're visiting a mine there owned by Kefi Gold and Copper Company.
Well, I don't want to digress too far away, but I do like supporting Mario's channel. So I'm not recommending that you buy anything or get involved in any of the investments that he's recommending. But so far, from following Moneko64 and doing the things that he's doing, and by matching and mirroring him in many ways, my stock portfolio has basically become like a quadruple bagger. So if any of you are involved, and I would say my portfolio is now like 80% miners. And although they look like they're going down right now, I'm not really that concerned. I think we're shaking out a lot of the weak hands, and I think gold and silver is going to the moon, even if it doesn't happen in the next few weeks. And that's the other problem with most people, is they want everything to happen overnight. Well, that's just not how it works, guys. So the bottom line is, China is draining the physical gold and silver, and they are going to be forcing true price discovery. And that's what Mario's talking about, along with King Kong 9888. And I also like King Kong, by the way. I think he's in Hong Kong, and I've been becoming buddies with him over at Twitter. I'm hoping someday that I can get him to come on my show, just because he's got a great sense of humor and he really knows what he's talking about. Again, guys, I'm no expert. I am a lawyer who's able to look at evidence, and I'm a critical thinker. So I'm able to extrapolate from what the evidence shows where we're going. But ultimately, you're the jury. And so my goal here is to get you to think, not think like me. Give me a bunch of ones if you understand that. I'm not here to try and push my political beliefs, which are pretty much probably right of Attila the Hun by modern thinking, but by our founding fathers thinking, they probably would call me a far left liberal, right? That's how far our society has digressed. But the bottom line is the COMEX and the LBMA are starting to lose control, and that's the point that I was trying to make. Let me find the next video, and I'm going to show you. Man, guys, look at how Mario has lost so much weight. What a stud. So this guy, I think he's on the carnivore diet now. He golfs a lot. Cool dude. Evenly killed. I think he does a show every Sunday around noon. One of my moderators, Shotgun Susie or She Stacks, please do me a huge favor and drop his link. And anybody who subs to his channel, please let him know in the comments that Attorney Michael Eline sent you, because I want him to know that he's got people out there who support him. This guy, to me, is a national treasure. Make no mistake about it. This guy is the messiah of gold and silver and Austrian economics. on YouTube and social media. There may be other people who know more than him, but the way he comes across in his judicious nature and his approachable demeanor makes him somebody that I highly recommend that you subscribe to. Let's go ahead and let him talk.
The paper game. The other thing that I think is happening is that the people inflicting pain on this paper game is a mixture of institutions and sovereign countries. We're going to look into that as well. And I'm also going to tell you what that will mean for the dollar as the major or premier reserve asset. Yeah, I think it's very important. Not just gold, but silver as well. People forget that up until the mid 60s, late 60s, silver was the major day-to-day, let's say, money and currency of commerce, small transactions. Gold has always
Yeah, and we're going to talk about how there was a war between gold and silver just quietly disappeared. And then the bankers were able to wrestle control over our silver and eventually create these paper markets, which destroyed true price discovery. I mean, there's no excuse that in the 80s, silver went up to $50. And then all of a sudden in 2025, people were so happy that it went to 50 again. I mean, if you look at the rate of inflation, $50 silver by today's standards is cheaper than it was back in the 80s. It's just ridiculous. Silver should be, if we were to get rid of all the silver manipulation, I believe it would be $300 to $500 an ounce. And if we can crush the COMEX, I think it's going to go to thousands of dollars an ounce. And now somebody just made a comment, Lack the Silver Stacker just made a comment about copper. Yeah, you know, if these commodities exchanges weren't artificially suppressing prices and using hypothecation and reverse hypothecation and all this other stuff, true price discovery would be allowed. And I think copper would probably be more than $18 an ounce. It's devastating to me that these billionaires and trillionaires who have the politicians in their hip pocket have been able to artificially suppress these prices, because all of us would be rich who actually had the foresight to invest in physical metals. It's just crazy to me. Give me a bunch of ones if you agree. Let's let Mario keep talking.
Been the money and currency for bigger ticket transactions, more for long-term savings. And I'll show you what I've got here because it proves to you that it's something that's been universal. This is one of my boxes with junk silver from all over the world. And these coins are not ancient. They're from the second half, mostly from the second half of the 20th century. So there you go. I think, again, there's the old saying that those who don't learn about history are bound to repeat the mistakes of history. And in this case, I think a lot of people out there who know nothing about monetary history, who know nothing about the importance of gold and silver as money.
And that's by design. The public education system, the educational industrial complex does not want people to know what's really going on, because the banksters, countries like communist China, and these politicians who get paid off by countries like communist China and these Federal Reserve central bankers, they want people to be stupid. And I believe that's why they're importing illegal aliens from low IQ countries, socialist countries, incapable of critical thinking into our country in droves, because they do not want an intelligent, educated population. Because if the American people knew the scam that was being pulled on them, there would be a revolution tomorrow. The problem is it's like boiling the frog. The critical thinkers are being edged out. People like you and I, who are of above average intelligence, are being edged out, and we're being replaced by people who just want to get a free check from the government. And they're going to vote for the politicians who give them that free check.
As currency, they're going to keep calling tops they're going to keep saying silver and gold are parabolic, and I think they're going to lose out big time. So
I agree.
let's start with the factor that I think has been evolving because of the manipulation of silver. Not so much for gold, but more silver. Of the last 50 years, let's say, the fact that there's been, as David Jensen has said here before, endless supply of paper silver on LBMA and COMEX that has basically destroyed or kept the silver mining industry at bay. So for the last 5, maybe now 6 years, there's going to be a silver deficit.
Yep.
And
That's right.
it takes a long time, 5 to 10 years, to develop a producing mine.
That's right. Now, I want to address a comment. So Charles Cantrell, 9840 says, if copper got up that high, that would it not crush the housing market and automotive industry? We couldn't afford to buy a car or a house. Well, here's the deal. Artificially suppressing prices also artificially suppresses wages. Okay, when you have a free market, laissez-faire capitalism, like Adam Smith wrote in Wealth of Nations, true price discovery and true wages will come into effect. And so as you get rid of the central banking system and go back to a gold and silver-based economy, people are going to get paid what the market will bear, not what a bunch of bankers say the market is. And so I would submit that when you allow the free markets to do their job, that people are going to be paid a wage based upon what they're worth, not based upon artificially suppressing prices. And you're also not going to have the constant printing of fiat currency. Okay. So when you stop printing worthless fiat currency through quantitative easing, what's going to happen is ultimately the economy will start to stabilize. The problem that we have is the debt that we have. Right now, our national debt, the interest that we pay alone, is greater than our defense budget. No country has ever survived that. And so that's why Trump went to communist China, in my view, this last meeting that he had, because I believe that he's trying to find a way to pay down our national debt. But the problem is he's inviting someone into our country, similar to what happened with the Plaza Accords in the 80s with Japan. But China's smarter than Japan was, and we'll talk about that. And I think ultimately we're going to have to give concessions, which means eliminating more individual rights. Can't say anything bad about China if they're going to come in and save the economy. And we're going to talk about that later on in the show.
And therein lies the problem. And what we have now as well is, aside from all the industrial demand, all the talk of this new solid state battery by Samsung, and more need for silver for everything else as well in this electrified world, and the fact that China is putting export controls from the 1st of January 2026, and China is the second biggest producer. That's a big reason why people are rushing to get physical.
That's right.
And it's not just for industrial anymore. I've spoken about a very good source, a very good friend that I have, who knows a lot of the people at the central banks, especially in the Middle East. And according to him, they're relentlessly buying physical gold and silver.
That's right. And so COMEX is keeping the price suppressed, which is enabling their friends in communist China to buy it at less than the market value. So ultimately, China, they're smart, man. They're basically depleting the world of its supplies of silver. It sort of reminds me of Robinson Crusoe. For any of you who didn't go to a public school and had a classical education, you'll probably remember Robinson Crusoe. I believe it was Goodman Friday, made Goodman Friday his slave, but would pay Goodman Friday, I believe, in gold and silver to do work. And ultimately, Goodman Friday ended up with all the gold and silver. And he basically turned Robinson Crusoe into his slave. And so any of you who want to do some research, who didn't get brainwashed in a Marxist-run public school, you can learn about that. I believe that communist China is basically flipping the script, and they're the new Robinson Crusoe. And I believe that that's what's happened here. Now, let's get into suing the COMEX and the LBMA for manipulation. And let's talk about the Hunt brothers and the full history of the great paper deception, how this was allowed to happen. The evidence will show the centuries-long war between gold and silver, and that the banks weaponized for control. So the evidence is going to show that there's been a centuries-long war between gold and silver that banks weaponized to ultimately gain control over the price and the price discovery of the physical metals. America began with bimetallism. Bimetallism. Everybody talks about the gold standard, but our country was founded and based upon bimetallism. Remember, America is an English common law jurisdiction. The difference is anything that was abrogated by the Bill of Rights was discarded. So we follow English common law, except we're otherwise in conflict with the Bill of Rights. So give me a bunch of ones if you understand what I'm saying. We didn't adopt everything from English common law because the people became the sovereign. There was no more king, okay? So America began with bimetallism under the Coinage Act of 1972 at a 15-to-1 ratio. That meant for every 15 ounces of silver that you owned, that would equal 1 ounce of gold. Okay, so that's how it worked. And you would actually get your silver and you would take it to a mint and you would have it minted. So the government didn't mint the coins directly. You would take your silver that you mined or that you got through trade, and you could actually have them mint coins for you. Now, but what happened is another Coinage Act of 1873, which is known as the infamous crime of 1873 by the farmers and the working man, the bankers won. And basically, silver was demonetized to favor gold-backed loans. And that caused deflation, and that crushed the debtors and the farmers, okay? And that's how it always works with central bankers, because they wanted to go in and swoop up all that land. And that's what they're doing right now. Look at BlackRock buying up all these homes so they can make everybody a renter, force everybody into a 15-minute city, right? So every time that you vote for big government and socialism, what you're really voting for is the bankers. And that's what these people who went to public schools and colleges don't understand, is they're playing right into the hands of the central bankers. They're so stupid because they've been brainwashed into this groupthink where they really believe that stripping their neighbor of their assets somehow is going to help them, but it doesn't. It's not going to help them. So ultimately, silver was demonetized to favor gold-backed loans, and that caused deflation. That crushed the debtors and the farmers, and the banks repeatedly caused and profited from bank runs. The banks would take your money and then loan out more money than they had, okay? Loan out more money than had, used your money to loan out to other people, just like they do now with gold and silver, with hypothecation and rehypothecation. They would loan this money out, and people got a wind of it, and they made what's called a run on the banks to get their money out. They got scared. And so what happened? Well, rather than put these bankers up against a wall with a firing squad, the bankers lobbied for protective laws like the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 instead of putting them in jail. And that's what really happened. That's exactly what happened, guys. That's exactly what happened. So I've got some direct evidence here that I'm going to share with you. I've just got to find the video. Just bear with me for 1 second. By the way, guys, look, again, I'm not an expert video guy. I'm a trial lawyer. So I don't do these shows all the time, but I do feel called just by my natural law feelings of rugged individualism that if I don't take action to try to teach you what I know, you're not going to know as much as I do. And once you know as much as I do, I expect you to be like a missionary and go out and teach other people these things and be educated. So just really quickly, because I'm not a pro at this, I've got to slowly find these videos here that I've got queued up for you. All right, so let's get into the next video. So this next video is about how they'll just change the rules, right? How COMEX will just change the rules. The government will just change the rules anytime true price discovery starts to occur. Let's get into it.
Today, we're doing something a little bit different than what we typically do. Normally, I talk about the options market. Today, I'm going to talk about markets just generally. And this is silver. which a lot of people on FinTwit are saying is about to bring down the global financial system. And there are banks that are about to collapse due to silver's price rise. And that causes fear, and that causes people piling in to buy silver as it's up 178% this year alone. In fact, if you look right here at December, start of December was the FOMC, and the FOMC caused this giant leg up. And now you see people saying, oh no, this is a signal of this thing about to happen. The banks are about to die. Hold on. Now, I'm a precious metal bull over the long term. I think that 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 20 years from now, gold and silver are probably going to be higher. I think assets generally are just going to be higher because of inflation. So that's where I fall. However, the rate of change is an issue. So let's dig into this a little bit. Now, why did I create this video?
I want you to catch that, okay? And again, all the links to all my sources are in the description, but I want you to catch that. Notice how he said the price of gold and silver is going to go up because of inflation. So what is inflation? Inflation is caused by an artificial increase of the currency supply. Every time the Federal Reserve prints fiat currency, that causes the dollar to become worth less. Since the creation of the Federal Reserve banking system in 1913, the dollar has lost approximately 96% of its value, okay? According to Voltaire, a famous philosopher, a famous historical figure, all fiat currency will return to its intrinsic value, which is zero. So it's not really that gold and silver are going up in value. It's that the dollar is becoming worth less, and that gold and silver act as a store of value. They act as a store of value. So you don't have to worry about putting your money in a savings account where you get 1% interest when real inflation is probably 13 to 17%. So you're still losing an enormous amount of the purchasing power of your fiat currency. But if you put it into precious metals, well, then you're saving quite a bit of it. Again, the problem is, and this is why I'm working with Citizens for Sound Money. By the way, I recommend, if Shotgun Susie can help me out, please find the link to Citizens for Sound Money and drop that link for the viewers to end the capital gains tax and state and local taxes on gold and silver. Gold and silver are real money. If you look at Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution, you'll see that there shall be no the states shall mint. Notice even I said print. That's how brainwashed we are as Americans. Shall mint no money other than gold and silver. But because of the IRS and the private corporations like the Federal Reserve who have taken over our currency system, they now have a capital gains tax on your money. I mean, that is, to me, totally unconstitutional, that we're being forced to pay a capital gains tax when we sell our gold or silver when it's actual money. I mean, how insane is it that we're being taxed on our labor, which is theft, and we're also being taxed on our gold and silver because it looks like it went up, but it didn't really go up. Okay, it didn't really go up in value. It's just that our fiat currency became worth less. And now you've got to pay a tax for the government's mismanagement of our economy. Absolutely insane. Give me a bunch of ones if you agree.
Well, this guy, and there's some internet shock jock person apparently that put this rumor out there, and now you see unconfirmed rumor. Cannot verify what is happening, but overnight there was this thing, and there's this inside repo. This seems to be completely full of nonsense. Now, I don't know this for a fact that this is nonsense, but 9 out of 10 times this stuff is nonsense, and I'm going to explain to you why I don't think this is about to take down the system. And the reason is because the system will always protect itself, always. That is the first thing. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's talk about this famous case called the Hunt brothers. Now, most of you watching this probably weren't alive at this time. And in fact, I was born in 1980, so I was just at the tail end of this. I can't recall reading this in the newspaper. But these two fellows here were the Hunt brothers, and their father was quite wealthy. And so what did they start doing? They were worried about the weakening U.S. dollar, and they saw silver as this incredible investment opportunity. And so what did they do? Well,
so this is really important. You guys need to learn about the Hunt brothers, because this is how the bankers, the fraudsters, were able to ultimately, by use of legislation, control the physical price of silver with the paper markets. And by the way, She Stacks is asking me, what's my favorite metal to stack? Well, I'll show it to you right now. Hold on a minute. Let me just, I want to make sure that I can see it up on my screen. My favorite is the American Gold Buffalo. I mean, isn't that a beautiful coin? Look at that. Just gorgeous. Gorgeous coin. This is my favorite. Gold Buffalo. Just an absolutely beautiful 999s fine gold. That's my favorite. She stacks. But I want you to really learn about and focus on this video that talks about the Hunt brothers, because this is going to really help you understand what happened. Like us, the Hunt brothers were concerned about inflation, fiat currency, and of course, they've been painted to be the villains by the central bankers and the COMEX and the LBMA. Why? Because they exposed the scam, and they were going to get rich off of the scam. They found a way to turn the fake market against itself, and they've been vilified the same way the public schools try to vilify our founding fathers, because they don't want individual rights. They want collectivism. It's easier to control people who don't believe in individual rights. And communist China knows that, and that's why they've infiltrated our college system, and that's why they support like the anti-ICE riots. They use their communist friends who are Americans from Silicon Valley. I think his name is Singham, Neville Singham. He's a billionaire Silicon Valley guy who lives in Shanghai with his wife, one of the co-founders of Code Pink. And they fund all these anti-American riots because they want illegal aliens to flood into our country. They don't want people who support America in our country. They want people in our country who want to get a free check from the government because they're easier to control. Okay, give me a bunch of ones if you agree with that. But I just want you to really focus on what this guy's saying. It's a very short video, and it's going to help you understand the true history of what happened with the Hunt brothers and how COMEX was able to wrestle control of the physical price of silver through the paper markets.
Started to buy a lot of silver, and that's a lot, not just in 1980 terms, but a lot in terms of now. You're talking about hundreds of thousands of ounces. And if I move my little face over here, what you see is that they started to corner the market. And as they started to do this, the price of silver started to rip. As you can see here in the 1979, it was about $6, and then it went all the way up to about $50 an ounce. So these guys had the market cornered, right? For fun reasons that seem to tie back into things that people are talking about today. And so what happened? As they grew or drew this giant position in the silver market, and everyone knew what they were doing, the price seemed to rise to this incredible level. And you start talking about issues with things like jewelry. And at the time we were doing film rolls. If you don't know what a film was, you put film in a camera and take a picture, and it was saved on this little film roll. And then you had to bring it down to the drugstore, and then they would print it for you. It's a wild experience. Anyways, back to the point. So industry started to maybe have a problem, or they didn't like the rate of change of the price. And everyone knew the Hunt brothers had the market cornered, or they had cornered the market, and they were bidding all the silver up, and they seemed like
So the industries that were benefiting from cheap gold or from cheap silver, they didn't like it. Okay, and so these people are all connected with like the Roosevelt administration or whatever it was at this time. It was the 80s. So Carter, whoever it was, the central banking system. They had to find a way to knock out these people because they're working outside of the central control system. These are smart, laissez-faire capitalists. The enemy now, according to them, right? The Hunt brothers, oh, they were terrible. All they were doing is using the system against itself that was already destroying our country because they were worried about the destruction of our currency system.
it was the end game, right? So what did they start to do? They being the exchanges and the regulators. Number one, they started to raise the margin requirements, right? The exchanges will lift the margin requirements. Number two, they start to invoke these rules. Sell only. If you remember the great financial crisis of a couple of years ago, they banned like short selling. So this is the thing I'm talking about, that the system will start to protect itself. The system is going to protect you before it lets people just have free markets. Like free markets go out the window if the system is about to collapse.
That's right.
And so if you think silver right now is about to drop the financial system, guess what? They will change the rules to protect the system.
That's right.
And in a way, it's like you kind of want that, because if you want the system in the end, like then we're talking about dystopia and all this other stuff. Nobody really wants that. But this is the point. The system really will change to protect itself, and you will start to see, okay, if JP Morgan is going to go down, guess what? They're going to protect JP Morgan.
That's right.
They're going to change the rules to make sure JP Morgan is fine. So what did this happen then? When you keep...
And why is that? Because JP Morgan funds the reelection campaigns of both the Democrats and the Republicans. The only division that you have is controlled opposition. It's controlled opposition. Like the example I was giving you earlier. The one guy will agree to vote for the bill because one of the constituents in his district wants him to vote for the bill. So he'll tell the political donor guy, go down the hall to my Democrat buddy and they'll vote against it. Just throw him 10 grand for his reelection campaign. I'll give him a call really quick, or I'll walk down and talk to him and get him prepped for you, lube him up a little bit. That's all this is. It's these multi-billion-dollar corporations are able to do this. And look, I don't have all the answers. I don't have all the solutions, but the least I can do is expose it. And maybe we can form parallel systems like the Amish did, or like Martin Luther King Jr. did, to where we can work outside in our own system and just discard these Luciferian satanic mother effers who are destroying our country and our way of life. Let's keep listening.
Changing these rules, they forced the Hunt brothers out of their position. They got this giant margin call. Silver crashes, as you can see on your screen here. And so the system sort of crushes the Hunt brothers, resets everything else. And whether or not this was a systemic risk in terms of the banking system was going to go down or not, the point is the same. At the point where the system is stressed, they will make sure that the system de-stresses, and they will do that through forcing traders like this out of the market. And so that is the thing I want everyone to understand or believe in. And I believe this is about as guaranteed as you can get, that the system will protect itself.
That's right.
And so if silver ends up in this situation where it's up 100, 200, 300% in a day, guess what's going to happen? You won't be able to buy anymore. They'll reduce that. They'll do all sorts of other things so that the system survives.
They'll manipulate the market.
Now, after that, obviously, there was this huge bankruptcy by the Hunt brothers. There was a bunch of different lawsuits and everything else. And then you have this thing now called the Hunt rules. And obviously, the takeaway here is that the system will always protect itself again. And so why does that matter? You say, well, Brent, this was the 1980s, but that doesn't have anything to do with now. Well, let's take a look at some recent events, right?
Check this out.
Is nickel. Nickel went bananas at the end of 2022, not that long ago. As you can see here, it went up 149% in a day. And some people say, well, Brent, this is a different market. It's not the same thing. It's kind of the same thing. What happened? The LME had all these problems. And what's fascinating about this is that there's a bunch of big financial institutions, right? AQR, DRW, in this case, it
So guys, I got to make a really quick head call. I'm going to let this thing run for you and I'll be right back.
was Elliott, a big hedge fund. They had trades busted. So they were in some trades on this day, right? That was part of their book. Those trades were busted by the exchanges. The exchange said, nope, we're breaking this trade, obvious error, whatever it may be. And these funds wanted to then sue the LME. Elliott tried. And as you can see down here, the Supreme Court denied the appeal. And so not only was the appeal denied, they had to pay for the LME's legal costs. And you can read about that yourself. So it looked like AQR and DRW's backed out. I don't know a ton about this, but the point is the same. Even these hedge funds got in trouble, or not in trouble, but were disadvantaged by these rule changes. And what did they have to do? They kind of had to go pound sand, is what it seems like. What about another famous event? We had flash crashes like in the early 2000s where trades were broken. But here's another famous one. This is the Kellogg's options trading day where there was obvious errors by Goldman. Guess what they did? They busted these trades, right? So Goldman had to pay a $30-something million fine. And if all those trades stood on these options trades, they were trading at really crazy prices, they would have lost like $500 million. And so the problem with this is that if you are on the other side of this trade, right, and you bought a cheap Kellogg's option, then you hedge that cheap Kellogg's option, they come out and they will bust your option trade. But then any hedge you put on or any other sort of related trade, you just had to eat those losses, right? Because the original trade was busted. So this is the type of stuff that happens when you get into these obvious errors or systemic issues, et cetera, et cetera. And so when you're thinking about silver going up to $1,500 now, it's because of the systemic banking crisis. It's likely that if there is legitimate problems in the market, the rules will start getting changed drastically. I'm not talking about...
What they'll do is COMEX, for example, will say, hey, the prices are going up too high, so now you have to add more money to your position, okay? You have to add more currency to your position, or we're going to eliminate your position. Or they'll just have like a power failure, or one of their computers will overheat, right? And then all trading will cease. And look, to them, it's like, well, go ahead and sue us. Go ahead and bring the government after us. We'll pay $1 billion fine and keep on committing fraud. In essence, that's my view. or at least they'll have the ability to commit fraud, because, far be it from me to accuse them of fraud when they're able to conceal so much evidence through the paper trade system. But that's what we've seen happen. As soon as there's been a huge increase in these prices, what happens is people have to start adding more to their margins. They have to add more to their positions, and they're forced to liquidate other assets. And when there's a huge sell-off like that, the market crashes. And when the market starts to crash, everything gets pulled down. And when that happens, obviously commodities are going to go down as well. Anytime there's a sell-off, that's what happens. So they're able to artificially manipulate these markets, and it's just totally unfair.
Little margin increase I'm talking about, they will really change the rules of the game. And so if you see those rules getting changed, then maybe you have a signal that something is awry. So anyways, hopefully this offers a little bit more of a level-headed analysis of what's happening in the markets. Again, I don't know specifically what's happening in gold and silver. And again, I think over time, the dollar keeps losing value. So
yeah, and John, I think you're just joining me, John-P9J80. We just discussed the Silver Act and all that stuff a little while ago. We'll strike that. We discussed the original one. I have not gotten into, look, I've already gone on, I'm close to 2 hours. I can't cover everything in one show, but I will get into that in another video. Absolutely. And if you've got any links you want to send me, go to my description. There's an email contact. My goal is to basically work with you guys as a team so we can work on educating each other, because I don't know everything. Again, I'm a trial lawyer. So what I try and do is take evidence and extrapolate from the direct and indirect evidence, my theory of the case, present the evidence to you as the YouTube jury, and allow you to ultimately decide whether it's a guilty verdict or a verdict for the plaintiff in this case, whatever it might be. And then we can work together. And if I make mistakes, I expect you guys to correct me, because it's like iron sharpening iron, like it says in the Bible. I'm far be it from me to say that I'm better than any of you. The goal is that we come together as a group and we work together to engage in critical thought and helping one another learn. It's not about who's smarter. It's about making each other smarter. Okay, let's let him finish.
these assets will continue to rise. It's just the rate of change, at least going up 178% in a year and up like 50% in the last 2-3 weeks. The rate of change has gotten a little extreme. And so just something to think about as you wade into the silver market.
All right, so that was a phenomenal video, and I've included his link in the description. So I definitely want you to check him out. So the bottom line is that the evidence shows that in the late 1970s, the Hunt brothers accumulated long positions in physical silver as a hedge against high fiat inflation. And that drove prices from $6 to nearly $50 an ounce. And, $50 an ounce back in the 80s, I would venture to say is closer to $100 an ounce today. So the fact that it went to $50 an ounce just recently and a little bit over 70, it's still not even close to what it was in the 80s when you take into account fiat currency debasement, which has been spurred on by the private, secretly run Federal Reserve banking cartels that have destroyed our country. So let's talk a little bit about the Hunt brothers accumulation details. So the COMEX changed the rules mid-game with Silver Rule 7 on January 7th, 1980. And that basically resulted in liquidation-only trading, retroactive position limits, and skyrocketing those margin requirements. In other words, remember when I talked about margins earlier, where you could buy in at 5% or 10% of the actual value, and you could long or short sell and maybe make a couple $100,000 off each trade in fiat currency. Well, that's how that all got started. So they always will use these pretextual reasons, the bankers, and blame it on a private individual and say that they're greedy, right? Even though they're really the greedy ones, the bankers. And they'll use that as a way to create an artificial emergency, just like one of the Biden or Obama officials said, let no crisis go to waste. Rahm Emanuel said that. So that's all they do, is they let no crisis go to waste. They create an artificial emergency using their control of the news media, the public schools, and the colleges to brainwash the American people into thinking that private individuals who are into free market economics and laissez-faire capitalism, that they're the problem. It's not really the bankers behind the scenes who are puppeteers of these politicians in the news media and the schools. And that's how they've been able to get to do all this stuff. Let me just take a look here really quick to see if I've covered that one. Okay, I covered that one. All right, the next one we're going to get into is coming up. We got 46. Just give me a second, guys. I'm just going through my list of materials to see if I've missed anything. All right, let's let Mario talk some more. I don't know if I played this video already, let me know, because this is kind of important. This is Mario again.
The final trading days of the year are...
We already played this one, so we've already covered this one. All right, so let's just go down the list here, but I'll let you guys look at Mario. I think he looks better than the AI stuff. All right. So again, the evidence has shown that COMEX changed the rules mid-game with Silver Rule 7 on January 7th of 1980. And then onward on, rule changes and paper game disruption were the order of the day. The evidence shows that a margin call crushed the hunts on Silver Thursday, March 27th, 1980, with silver crashing over 50% in one day, while COMEX repeatedly used technical glitches to halt trading during rallies. And we saw that happen just recently. In fact, JP Morgan was forced to pay over $900 million in settlements for spoofing. But the problem is, guys, when they're making billions of dollars, that's like water off a duck's back. And they're not facing criminal time. So let's give them $1 billion. Who cares? They're making so much money, they don't care. Trust me, they do not care. So now let's get into the great paper deception. The great paper deception. Let me get my beautiful mug back up closer. By the way, you guys like my S&W 500? I always try to show you a different weapon here, because without the Second Amendment, we couldn't protect the First, which is what I'm doing right now, trying to exercise my First Amendment rights by talking to you about stuff. So that is a 50 caliber Smith & Wesson 500, which is my bear gun. So whenever I go to Alaska, I'll have that strapped to my chest. The thing is about as big as a rifle, and that'll take down a polar bear. That's a pretty nice piece. And I use that to protect my gold and silver, which I don't normally store at my home, by the way. So for all you people who you might want to weigh the risk versus reward of trying to do a home invasion at my house, because I am highly trained at close quarters battle, and I have no gumption about protecting my wife and children. So let's get into a little bit about what the evidence will show. The great paper deception. And before I do that, I just want to make sure that I've got the next video queued up for you guys, if I haven't already showed it to you. Just give me 1 second here. I think we talked about that. We talked about the LBMA COMEX market suppression regime and the price discovery moving east. We already covered that with Mario. But here's what ended up happening. The evidence will show that the current 500-to-1 or higher ratio of paper market contracts to physical silver creates an artificial ceiling on global prices. We talked about that. The evidence has also been demonstrated to prove that the June 2026 delivery failures are proving that the COMEX inventory is a mathematical impossibility. Okay, a mathematical impossibility. The evidence will also show that the COMEX and the LBMA are losing control. And that's primarily because of communist China and countries like India. Okay. So let me just make sure that I haven't shown you this video already. And for those of you who have stuck around for me, I appreciate that. I know that this has gone on for a long time here. Let me make sure. Hopefully I haven't shown you this one. All right, so let's go ahead and let Mario talk about this. So the evidence will show, again, that these June 2026 delivery failures are proving the COMEX vault inventory is a mathematical impossibility. And I'm going to let Mario tell you all about that right now. And again, I'm calling Mario as my de facto expert witness to prove my case because I consider him to be an expert. So let's let him talk.
Game. The other thing that I think is happening is that the people inflicting pain on this paper game is a mixture of institutions and sovereign countries. We're going to look into that as well. And I'm also going to tell you what that will mean for the dollar as the major or premier reserve asset. Yeah, I think it's very important.
He's right.
Not just gold, but silver as well. People forget that up until the mid 60s, late 60s, silver was the major day-to-day, let's say, money and currency of commerce, small transactions. Gold has always been the money and currency for bigger ticket transactions, more for long-term savings.
That's right.
And I'll show you what I've got here because it proves to you that it's something that's been
and
universal.
you showed us this already, so we kind of talked about that. That's his constitutional currency. That's the 90% silver that most countries minted. And now we mint everything out of base metals. And that was the beginning of the fall of Rome when they started using base metals instead of real money to create their currency. And the same thing has happened here. 1965, all of our silver has started being was taken out of our coins, and he's showing you that this is the constitutional currency that sovereign countries used before we had the central banks destroy our economies. But in this video, which is included in the video description of this video, he gets into how the COMEX and the LBMA are losing control. They just don't have enough physical silver. There's not enough physical silver above ground for them to deliver. And so with communist China demanding delivery now, it could be that the people who are holding long positions are going to be refusing to sell their longs because they see the writing on the wall. Because even these greedy bankers and these multi-billionaires who have the money to actually invest in the silver markets and the paper markets, they realize what's coming. It's like, I think Mario had a description of holding a beach ball under you in a swimming pool. At some point, it's eventually you're going to lose control, and the beach ball is going to pop back up above the surface, and that's what's happening right now with the paper markets. It's just a matter of time, and that's why I tell you guys, I would never sell my gold or silver over my dead body. I would never sell. So these unallocated silver accounts function as a fractional reserve scheme designed to siphon wealth from retail investors. That's all it's doing, guys. That is all it's doing. So let's talk about the RICO framework, okay, the racketeering laws that we could potentially use against COMEX. The evidence will show the patterns of spoofing and, quote, banging the close, unquote, serve as primary evidence of systemic price fixing, allowing us to move from theory to legal action under the racketeering statutes targeting institutional short sellers. And let me just see if I've shown you this other video. And again, I appreciate you guys showing me your patience here. I've already shown you that one. So you've already seen that one. So we already showed the video about full regulatory capture and spoofing patterns. So go back and rewind this video. Always save. Make sure to like and subscribe, guys. And by the way, I'm going to take a quick little break to go and look at the comments. Unlike a lot of these guys who do these YouTube channels, I know that I'm audience driven. And especially with the females, I love it that I have so many females on my channel. It's a real blessing. Being a father and a provider and a protector, there's nothing better than having the matronly love of women on my channel. So I'm going to go back because I know you ladies like communication. So let me go back over here. and take a look. Hey, Mr. Osgood, good seeing you, bro. Lax Silver Luster says history repeats itself, but apparently our knowledge does not. Well, that is true. Well, especially when our public education system and colleges suppress history and they present a skewed version of history that is not the truth. And obviously they, just like the paper markets suppress the prices, our education system suppresses education. They don't want critical thinkers. They want stupid people who will vote for socialism and free stuff from their neighbor's paycheck. And they'll use things like critical race theory to blame white people or blame the boomers to take the eyes off of the people behind the scenes who are really manipulating our economic system. So let me see here. So Ryan Doyle, 4344, says, here late, first timer, all roads lead to Ron Paul. Man, you know, dude, I'm not going to lie. I really like Ron Paul, and I think he was right. I'm more of a libertarian-minded guy. I think that both parties are a uniparty system, although I do like a lot of the things that Trump did with respect to protecting our borders and the Second Amendment laws, enforcing the Second Amendment. I think that those are good things. So I'll take what I can get. You know what I mean? Let me see here. Shotgun Susie says, I don't trust them. Well, neither do I. Lack the Silver Stacker says, I just bought organic peppers for the first time and they had no seeds. How's that organic? Dude, it's not. That's crazy. That GMO stuff is freaking poison, man. And it's funny because, you know, Whole Foods, anytime they go corporate, now you've got to look at the labels on their food to make sure it's not GMO. It's crazy to me. It is absolutely disgusting how anytime you get these big corporations involved, you get a guy like Bill Gates who wants to make fake meat, inject mosquitoes with so-called vaccines, and commit battery on the population by allowing these mosquitoes to fly around and bite people. It's just insane. And thank you, SheStacks86. It is fantastic info. And I'm doing this for you guys. I've already been going almost 2 hours. And I'm mainly doing it because my wife got on me. She doesn't like it when I do these shows because I could be working. But we got a bunch of new paid subscriptions. And because of that, I am now, she's telling me, well, look, you give the people what they want. If they're paying you, you have a duty to go live at least once a week. So that's what I'm doing. And I've got a serious back injury from when I was in the Marine Corps. Hey, thank you, Shotgun Susie, for putting up Citizen for Sound Money's link. And yeah, definitely, SheStacks86, awesome channel. I definitely recommend you guys go and subscribe to her. Great channel. Hey, what's going on, Crazy Kathy? Sent flow state for 200 joules. Don't know what that means, but let me know what that means. By the way, guys, if any of you guys gave me any donations or super chats, I don't have time to scroll up and look at everything, and I haven't been paying attention because I'm trying to get through this material. It's a lot of material to cover today. But type it in that you did at the bottom so I can at least thank you. And Selwyn, thanks for showing up, bro. Selwyn's been one of my moderators, I think, for almost 2 years now. Yeah, I've got a pretty cool audience. I got a pretty cool audience of patriots. So I'm hoping you guys like this material. It took me a good 8 hours to put together this script for you today. So this took a lot out of me. I'm tired, man. I didn't expect the show to go this long. All right. So let's get into it. So again, the evidence will show that this is classic regulatory capture and fraud on the market. Private individuals and bullion dealers like Hero and SD Bullion could act as private attorneys general and sue under the CEA, RICO, antitrust, and fraud. And that's why we should all be demanding physical delivery and the abolition of the paper market system, or at least deny the paper markets the ability to set the physical price. That's insane. It goes against everything our founding fathers stood for, everything they stood for. The physical markets, laissez-faire capitalism should decide prices, not a bunch of billionaires who manipulate the physical price with the paper markets. That's insane to me that the American people have allowed this. Now let's talk a little bit about Roosevelt's gold nationalization and socialism as theft. So the evidence clearly shows, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that FDR's executive order 6102 in 1933 was an outright theft in violation of natural law by seizing private gold at $20.67 an ounce and then revaluing it to $35 an ounce to fund his socialist New Deal expansion. So the public school systems and the colleges, Roosevelt saved the economy with the New Deal. Well, what he really did is he stole your money, stole your gold by nationalizing it and using what amounts to eminent domain to steal it from you and then revalue it and selling it back to the bankers who funded his reelection campaigns, and then use that to pay off his New Deal from the money that he borrowed in order to get votes, right? See, these politicians never want us to see what's really going on. So they'll blame someone like the Hunt brothers or some billionaire, who actually had a business, who actually came up from the bottom, instead of the true billionaires like the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers who manipulate the markets behind the scenes and then use that as an excuse to pass a law. So in this case, Roosevelt basically, for lack of a better word, confiscated our gold, made it illegal to own it unless in certain limited cases, like if you're a dentist, or you could still keep a couple of your coins. Thank you so much, you communist piece of shit, for letting me keep some of my money that I earned to support my family. Then he revalued it so he could pay off his socialist program. Like Margaret Thatcher says, the only problem with socialism is eventually you run out of other people's money. And that's what he did. He funded the New Deal expansion using your gold. So he was no hero, guys. So the great taking and asset seizure plans. I don't know if I played this video yet, but let's see if I did. Well, let's go ahead and let it run. It's only a couple minutes.
It's not a long book, and it's called The Great Taking. So what's the Great Taking about? Well, it says here, you are invited to read or download The Great Taking, a book written about the scheme of central bankers to subjugate humanity by taking all securities. What does the author, David Rogers Webb, mean? What does he mean by that?
And again, this is very nefarious. Remember, bankers helped fund the Bolshevik Revolution. Okay, they funded Lenin to send him into Russia. And what was the end result? One of the greatest transfers of wealth in world history, where the people were stripped of all their assets. And the only people who made money or who got anything out of it was the government officials, the high party members, exactly like what's going on in communist Fornia. The same exact system is being used right now in communist Fornia and big government.
That all securities. Well, he means stocks, bonds, anything that's with a broker or a bank. Bank deposits and property financed with debt. So that's what we're going to look at today, The Great Taking. I think it's a must-read book, not just for people who have investments, but for people who want to understand what the world is all about, what's been happening. Well, ever since, I would say, 1694, because that's when the granddaddy of the central banks, the Bank of England, was created by royal charter. Before we start looking into this book, and also the author, just wanted to say that this is the author's opinion. He's looked into things that I've been looking at for the last 7, almost 8 years, like the derivatives mountain, like the fact that the system is rigged by the central banks through money printing. He looks at the bond market, how important interest rates are, but he goes a lot further than I do in terms of how they're going to do it. And that's why I recommend the book. But the other thing I would say, after you watch this video, you need to think hard about what you want to do yourself. You got to do your own research. I'm not telling.
That's right. And that's what I keep telling you guys. You need to do your own research. And another channel that I recommend you look at is Francis over at the Market Sniper, because he really goes into detail how governments try to use Bolshevism and socialism and forcing it on these public school kids to brainwash them into thinking that you and I are the enemy, right? That you and I, the people who worked our asses off to pay all this bullshit in taxes and whatnot, to pay the interest on their loans and on the national debt, so they can keep on making tons of income, right? Now, I'm not going to play this whole video, but it is in the video description. If you look at the video ending in 120S, this is about a little less than a half hour. This video is extremely important. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if I can drop it in for you. Give me 1 second, guys. I'm just looking over at my screen here. I'm going to try to drop this in the chat box for you. This is a super, super important video. Hey, what's going on, 10-time shooters? Good seeing you, brother. I just dropped in the link for this video. This particular video that I'm dropping in, if you're a critical thinker and you really want to learn about the great taking and about how the government is trying to strip you of your assets, this is going to really lay it on the line for you. That's right, James. David James says they funded 2 world wars. The Rothschilds are notorious for having funded both sides of every war, including Tiny Mustache Man, the Bolshevik Revolution. Their goal is to create central control through socialism. And socialism denies individual rights. And that's why socialists and communists should be imprisoned, because America is supposed to be a constitutional republic where individual rights are what matter, not the collective. Remember, in a collectivist society, 90% of the people stand around with their hand out looking to you and me, the productive people, to provide for them. That's the problem with socialism, is that it can never work, because in a democracy, which we are not supposed to be a democracy, we're supposed to be a republic. In a democracy, 51% of the people can decide the fate of the other 49. And most people don't want to work. Most people don't want to be productive. The only way they're going to do it is if they have no choice. And the government enables them not to be productive by allowing them to vote for free things. And that's what's happening in our country today, unfortunately. So I'm not going to play the whole video, but I just want to let you know that the evidence will show that Edward Bernays, B-E-R-N-A-Y-S, a nephew of Sigmund Freud, who I think was a complete sociopath, psychopath, who also happens to be Bernays, the father of modern public relations and propaganda, worked with the central bankers and the Roosevelt administration. He openly advocated the conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses. So there's that word, the masses. Remember, we're supposed to be an individual rights country. And that's why the republic has slowly been turned into a democracy, because these bankers want us to have the direct vote, because they can use propaganda through people like the Bernays philosophies and their control over the media with advertising money, market capture, to control the masses. And through democracy, these voters will vote for free things. And that's really what this boils down to. And so he helped manufacture consent for expanded government power. That's what he did. Wars and the New Deal through elite media and banking connections. That's what Bernays did. So really quickly, let me just try to find this video about Bernays. And I am getting a little bit tired, guys, so just bear with me. It's a lot of work for me to do these videos, so I do support people getting the paid memberships. So that's the most important thing, because then I can do back channel shows where I can really tell you what I think. But just know that this is not easy for me to do these lives like this. I'm dying. So just bear with me. Let's learn a little bit from Dr. Beverly Yuen Thompson about propaganda and the public mind in the making by Edward L. Bernays. And I'll play as much as I can for you, but it's like over an hour long, so we're not going to get too much into it.
I wanted to talk about this book, Propaganda, The Public Mind in the Making by Edward Bernays.
Advising the client on attitudes and actions to win over the public, and then educating, informing, and persuading the public to accept these social goods, ideas, concepts, or whatever.
Edward Bernays was born in 1891 and lived till 1995. Sigmund Freud was his double uncle. Edward Bernays got only a bachelor's degree from Cornell University and became the self-proclaimed expert and founder of the field public relations. And he wrote this book, Propaganda, in 1928.
That's right.
He was notorious for working with some evil corporations such as cigarette companies, where he focused on advertising cigarettes to women smokers to encourage women to smoke.
Oh yeah, and as an aside, Philip Morris, they would hire experts to say that smoking's actually good for you. Just like they have their own experts now in the pharmaceutical industry, right? That mRNA is good for you, right? That experimental drugs are good for you. They're safe and effective. So this is a standard operating procedure. And Bernays was the guy who sort of aided this sort of philosophy where you could use propaganda to convince the masses that anything the government says is good, anything big corporations say is good. Let's listen to what she has to say. Great video, by the way.
With his campaign called Torches of Freedom, to have the cigarettes represent this kind of feminist liberation of women, and also to associate cigarettes with thinness. He worked with the United Fruit Company in Guatemala, which participated in the overthrow of a democratically elected government. So he was really practicing the field of propaganda, public relations.
That's right.
Working with these corporations that were attempting to mass manipulate the public. And so I wanted to talk about this book and overview it chapter by chapter, especially as a sociology professor. I'd love to cover this book in classes such as...
Okay, so this link I provided for you in my description. This link ends in BQA. So if you look down under the videos that I provided for you, if you go to BQA, you can learn about Bernays. But Bernays, even based on information and belief, he was the guy behind the flicker on the TV screen. The flicker on the TV screen was another way that you could brainwash people. There's so many things that you guys don't know because this stuff has been suppressed. If any of you have ever seen the movie Logan's Run, that's something I recommend that you watch. Basically sort of introduces you to the Orwellian thought control that big government and central control can have over the masses. But the brainwashing in the public school and the higher education system is so awful that we're convincing, or our school system is convincing a whole new generation of young people that stripping people who worked hard all their life of their assets is social justice. And this really started under Obama. And then of course we have critical race theory that all white people are bad, all white people are racist. It's all designed to take your eye off of the central bankers and the large corporations behind the scenes who are orchestrating all this stuff. So it's something that I want you to keep in mind. So the evidence will show that Thomas Jefferson warned that banking institutions are more dangerous than standing armies. Remember, our founding fathers did not want a standing army. And that's one of the reasons why every 2 years there's a Senate appropriations bill to refund the Army. The only constitutional military force that's allowed to exist is the Navy and Marine Corps. There was never supposed to be a standing army. We, the people, are the regular militia, and it's our job as regular militiamen to be able to defend our borders and do all these things that we're supposed to do. But Americans have become soft. And with the introduction of democracy, direct voting for the president, direct votes for the Senate and the Senate legislatures, the bankers have been able to manipulate the system. And until we return to a constitutional republic, I don't see much hope for this country other than creating parallel systems. And that's why I definitely want you guys to like and subscribe to my channel and reach out to me on my contact so we can start trading with each other. If you've got a dairy farm and you've got raw milk, I need raw milk. I like cholesterol. I like the healing powers of natural foods. I don't want to buy things that are genetically modified. You see what I'm saying? If we form parallel systems like Martin Luther King Jr. did, we can force these bankers and the outside systems that are brainwashing our children into accepting maybe a little bit less and allowing us our freedoms back. So that's something that I definitely recommend. And you absolutely should homeschool your children. And I work with Brett Pike over at Cubs to Bears Books. He is a homeschooler and a homesteader. And he's somebody who teaches patriotism and love of country like I do. And I've had him on as a guest on my show several times. So I definitely recommend that you look at Cubs to Bears Books over at Twitter or X. Some great videos. He's all over Instagram. Even Elon Musk has shared several of his videos. So he's becoming very popular now in the homeschooling sphere of influence. So I definitely recommend you check out Brett Pike, BrettPike, over at Cubs to Bears Books. Thank you, Juan Mongus Mocus 1533. Juan says, liked and subscribes. Glad I found your channel. Well, I'm glad you found me too, because as Benjamin Franklin said, we can either hang together or we will surely hang separately. If you're a critical thinker in today's day and age, you are the enemy of the state. Make no mistake about it. These government agencies do not want critical thinkers, which is one of the reasons why they're flooding our country with people from third world countries with very low statistical average IQs, who come from socialist countries who expect the government to provide for them from cradle to grave. 15-minute cities are coming next, where you will own nothing and be happy. So the next thing I want to talk about is the Venona Project. Okay, a lot of people don't know about the Venona Project because that's been suppressed by the news media as well. But far left Harvard even had to admit that McCarthy was right, that communists were infiltrating every aspect of our government and political system. And the Harvard-affiliated research confirmed extensive Soviet communist infiltration during the New Deal era. This vindicated that McCarthy was right about traitors in our government dedicated to destroying natural law. Despite decades, and they're still doing it today in the public schools and the colleges, vilification of McCarthy by Hollywood, mainstream news media, and of course, socialists. The ACLU aggressively demanded many of these infiltrated traitors should not face imprisonment, and they were guilty, as far as I'm concerned, under anti-subversion laws like the Smith Act. Remember that communism and socialism are dedicated to the destruction of individual rights and freedoms. They'll use the Bill of Rights to get what they want, the same way communist China uses our laws to destroy our country and our trading laws. But make no mistake about it, communism and socialism are dedicated to the destruction of your freedom and individual rights, and they have no place. They should not be allowed in this country. They should be declared illegal. It should be a capital crime to show support to any organization that is dedicated to the overthrow of the republic. Give me a bunch of ones if you agree. Now, again, we talked about the Great Taking and paralleling historical asset seizures and infiltration patterns. And again, there are links in my description that will discuss that. But now let's get into, we're starting to close out the show. Let's get into the economic ties with China, and the economic ties that we're going to be forced to have with China because we've destroyed our currency system will mean the rejection of natural law rights in this country. And it will turn America into a dictatorial communist state. The evidence will show that high-level engagements, such as President Trump flying to China with 18 powerhouse CEOs, including Elon Musk, Tim Cook, Jensen Huang, and Larry Fink, were not ordinary trade talks, but historic negotiations for a new monetary global order. And so let me see if I can find that video really quick so I can sort of cue you in on what's going on here. This is just blowing my mind that this stuff is happening and that we're allowing it to happen. We're allowing this to happen to our own country. I mean, where are my American patriots, for crying out loud? This is just crazy to me. All right, let's let Mario talk. And you can see Mario, how he lost so much weight. I just love this. I mean, the guy got super lean. Let's let him talk.
Someone said in the comments earlier that don't hold your breath. It's a nothing burger. It could be, but it could also be significant because Bill Murphy, who I invited, I'm not sure if he'll come, from GATA, always said that the unraveling of this paper manipulation of the gold and silver would be from outside, from other countries wanting physical. It would never come from within, from the COMEX or the LBMA, because those markets are controlled by the regulators and the bankers. So this is very interesting. Such situation in the UK. Well, it's I think everywhere around the world there's so many distractions, so many, they're bombarding us so much psychologically. And here in the UK they're talking a lot about what's his name, Russell Brand. That's the big news.
Yeah.
So they must be wanting to distract us from something if they're focusing on that. But they're still pushing this energy bill. I'm not sure what's going to go through. Supposedly they can fine you, will be able to fine you eventually if you don't maintain your house in a certain fashion. Or put you in jail. So there's a lot going on. Graham from Lancashire. Yeah, Sarah Bounty, it is a significant arbitrage. That's right.
Okay, so this video ends with 203S. He goes into a significant discussion on the Shanghai premiums and what's happening with what's going on with China. But ultimately, because our government has destroyed our economy by allowing these bankers to basically control our economic system in America, we're going to have no choice but to have communist China come in and basically take over our country, because they've got all the money. They've got all the gold. He who holds the gold wins. They've been buying up gold and silver in record amounts because these idiot paper markets are basically allowing China to buy everything up at less than its fair market value. And gold is the only real money. Silver is the only real money, but it also has industrial applications. So this video ends in 203S. And this is in the description of my video today that I'm doing live. But let me just explain what I believe really happened and why all these CEOs went to Shanghai. This was basically our country begging China to save us. This is what I believe. I believe that the evidence will show that this mirrors the 1985 Plaza Accord signed at the Plaza Hotel in New York, where the U.S. and allies basically forced Japan, because look, Japan was overtaking us economically because they know what they're doing. They actually used the Deming philosophy. Deming was a guy who taught about factories and how to run them properly, making sure that the CEO or the head of the company would show up a lot. Because when the boss shows up, people work harder, right? So he enforced this calisthenics, getting people to work together as a team. So the Japanese basically stole our philosophy, which helped us win World War II with our factories, and became an economic powerhouse. And so the Federal Reserve bankers didn't really like that. So they forced this Plaza Accord. And it dramatically strengthened the Japanese yen, but it was also a Trojan horse. In Japan, they weren't quite up to speed yet. I don't think they realized what was happening. But by strengthening the yen, it basically caused the yen to roughly double in value. And that triggered what's called an asset bubble. And that resulted in what we call the lost decades of Japan. Japan is basically still in a depression because of the Plaza Accord. Now, China, they're way more savvy and sophisticated than Japan was at the time. And so Japan doesn't want their yuan to go into a bubble like the Japanese currency yen did, right? So what is China doing? They're going to use gold instead of their own currency. Okay, that's what's going to happen because Japan studied China's fate and they refused currency destruction. So China is going to pledge roughly $1 trillion in investments to U.S. factories and infrastructure in exchange for tariff relief, market access, eased technology restrictions, and a privileged seat at the new monetary table. possibly including Taiwan concessions. And you've already seen Trump backing off on Taiwan. I think he's going to let China invade Taiwan. He doesn't really have a choice now. And whether it was by design or not, we've used up a lot of our munitions on Iran, right? I have no doubt that Israel, because of the central banking system, and they control our Federal Reserve System. I mean, the Rothschilds, the Balfour Agreement, the Warburgs, who were trained by the Rothschilds. Remember, the Rothschilds created the state of Israel. So it could very well be that this was all manipulated and managed to usher in China as the next world power. So what's going to happen is, now that China is going to have this privileged seat at the new monetary table, in return, the U.S. is going to allow controlled dollar weakening against gold by marking reserves to true market prices. So we've got this gold right now. It's valued at what, 30 or 40 bucks an ounce in the Federal Reserve, if it's even there. And what's going to happen is that will help inflate away our unpayable debt. And unfortunately, I'm running out of time. I'm getting tired. So I wanted to really go into more detail on this, but I can come on and do another show. I'll be looking out for your comments as we wrap up the video today. But ultimately, that will help inflate away the unpayable debt, while China's massive physical gold holdings will explode in value, which means yours will too as well. So China, in a way, is helping you. The issue is you better get the hell out of the United States, because when these communist Marxist Democrats take power again, they're going to tax the shit out of your precious metal, saying that you're a greedy person. Oh, you didn't build that. Someone else built that. They'll try to find a way to strip you of your assets. And so if you don't leave the country, or maybe renounce your U.S. citizenship, once you're able to get your physical assets out of the country, you're going to be stuck paying for all their welfare check voters. And that's coming. Make no mistake about it. Unless you homeschool your kids and form parallel systems, that is coming. So what's going to happen is China's massive physical gold holdings are going to explode in value, and physical gold is going to continue flowing out of the U.S. to China, because China's demanding hard assets. And let's talk about that. Well, America, I believe, is trading. China and Japan don't want our dollars anymore because they know they're worthless. Okay. So they want to be paid in hard assets, gold. Okay. I believe that the evidence will show that FASB 56 or FASB 56 is hiding the transfer of our gold that we're trading with China with right now. And so this is going to import basically China's digital control grid and ideological indoctrination into the United States. These ties force America to reject natural law for collectivist state power. And it's going to turn us communist from within. And we already see California doing that. And so I'm going to see if I can find this video really quick. Just give me 1 second.
Higher than on Western paper exchanges. That gap reflects real supply stress and encourages arbitrage, with metal flowing out of COMEX and LBMA inventories toward Shanghai until prices converge. Years of suppressed pricing discouraged production, leaving the market in a structural deficit that has persisted since 2021. As delivery becomes more important than paper settlement, price discovery naturally shifts toward physical venues. At the same time, broader financial cycles are turning. Long-term ratios between financial assets and hard money are breaking down, signaling a transfer of value away from stocks and bonds toward gold and silver. In periods of currency instability and rising debt, hard assets historically outperform as capital seeks durability rather than leverage. Let's get back to the interview.
Why is silver going up? Well, it's gone up this year because of a huge surge in demand for solar panels. Electric vehicles are using more and more silver because there are more of them. The AI infrastructure.
Why do solar panels need silver?
Well, if you want a solar panel to work, one of the main ingredients is silver.
All right. So
I can't tell you about the.
So that's Clive. This video is also in the description of my video, and it ends in 668, and it just talks about the convergence pressure. So let's get into it. So basically, let's talk about the war on critical thinking, okay? Brainwashing the next generation. I believe that the evidence is proven in this jury trial today, this YouTube jury trial, that there is a deliberate world government aligned war on critical thinking, using public schools as the primary weapon to brainwash children into rejecting biology, common sense, and natural law. I mean, if you can convince a child that men can be women and women can become men, they'll believe anything. They'll believe anything. And you see that happening right now in real time. And in fact, you're being called a bigot or something if you don't go along with this. And they'll use peer pressure and groupthink to make you think that you're the problem, right? The evidence has shown and has demonstrated that the Prussian-style compulsory education imported into America by the Rockefeller family was designed not to create independent thinkers, but obedient factory-style thought and state loyalists. John D. Rockefeller and his General Education Board openly funded this model to produce useful idiots, compliant citizens who would never question authority. And if you ever try to argue with a college graduate, they think they've got this degree on their wall, and they'll immediately engage in personal attacks, ad hominem attacks on you, and call you names. And that's about the only kind of debating that you'll learn on a college campus, because critical thinking is not part of the process of education. They don't teach classical education. They teach groupthink. If you don't agree with everything your professor says, oh, you're one of these radical conspiracy theorist wackos. It's all about groupthink. And again, this is why Biden wanted to give everyone a free education, because the education system is basically a propaganda school to teach absolute obedience to the coming Marxist state. Okay, so the evidence has also shown today that this system pushes alternative lifestyles like transgender ideology and the idea that biology is a social construct. Is Thomas Paine warned in his book Common Sense, when you abandon reason and common sense, tyranny always follows. When you abandon reason and common sense, tyranny will always follow. And we've seen that with the communist Chinese revolution, the Bolshevik revolution. It always follows. If you can convince children that biological sex is fake and fluid, they will believe anything their teachers or the state tells them, including the surrender of their natural law rights. It's just unbelievable to me, guys. Let's talk a little bit about George Bernard Shaw. Bernard Shaw's rejection of individual rights. This is something that really blows my mind, because we have so many socialists and communists who always run back to the Bill of Rights. Oh, but my right of this, my right of that. But the granddaddy of socialism, Bernard Shaw, made it very clear that he rejected natural law for collectivism, stating people must justify your existence. You must justify your existence to the state or face elimination, guys. That's what socialists really think. That's their doctrine. And that is the same philosophy that China is exporting to the United States right now. And so let me see if I can find this video on Shaw justifying existence, because I like to back up things I say with proof. So let me see if I can find this really quick. Hopefully you guys are enjoying the show so far.
To all punishment whatsoever. I don't want to punish anybody. But there are an extraordinary number of people whom I want to kill. Not in any unkind or personal spirit, but it must be evident to all of you. You must all know half a dozen people at least who are no use in this world, who are more trouble than they are worth. And I think it would be a good thing.
Yeah, and this is what they teach in the colleges now. Critical race theory. Oh, white people are systemically racist. They're irredeemably guilty of the sins of their fathers, and they need to justify their existence. We need to strip them of their assets. This is all being taught in the public school system right now, today, guys. Make no mistake about it. It's socialism repackaged as social justice, and the World Economic Forum is behind this. The World Economic Forum has a partnership with the American Federation of Teachers. Larry Fink is pushing to have the World Economic Forum's curriculum enforced into our public schools. We are one election away at midterms right now from this happening. And we already saw it, the beginnings of it under the Biden administration in this last run that we had, where we had so many Democrats advocating for the slaughter of anybody who refused to take the vaccine.
To make everybody come before a properly appointed board, just as he might come before the income tax commissioners, and say every 5 years or every 7 years, just put him there and say, sir or madam, now will you be kind enough to justify your existence?
Justify your existence.
If you can't justify your existence, if you're not pulling your weight in the social boat, if you're not producing as much as you consume, or perhaps a little more, then clearly we cannot use the big organization of our society.
So remember, so socialism operates under this collectivist view where there are no individual rights, and the state gets to decide who's productive and who's not. And so they'll use your social credit score to determine whether or not you can leave your 15-minute city, whether or not you can go to the grocery store. And that is socialism. That's really what it is. And you got it right there from Bernard Shaw, the father of modern socialism. And his program is the exact mirror image of what the World Economic Forum is pushing on our schools, on our colleges, and on politicians. This is what's coming, guys. If you don't start forming parallel systems and start finding ways to work with people like me and like the people who are on my channel today, to force these people, these socialists and communists, anti-American trash, to start accepting the fact that our rights come from our creator, not from the state. And since our rights come from the creator, because we were endowed with these inalienable rights by birth, they cannot be taken away by the state. Let's get into the next one.
Who loved eugenics, and yeah, he believed everyone should have to justify their existence. You probably remember this classic.
I think it would be a good thing to make everybody come before a properly appointed board, just as he might come before the income tax commissioners, and say every 5 years or every 7 years, just put him there and say, sir or madam, now will you be kind enough to justify your existence?
We kind of saw that already, but you get the idea. Socialists want you to justify your existence. Now, who's valuable to a socialist? Someone who agrees with everything that they say, not someone who's really productive. It's about thought control. If you go along with the program, you're a good citizen. If you don't, you need to justify your existence, okay? All right, so let me just see here. All right, so guys, I'm going to get ready to close out my closing arguments for this jury trial today. But before I do that, by the way, I smell my wife is making some bacon downstairs, and it's organic bacon that's not injected with mRNA. So that's a good thing. And my stomach's starting to growl. But I do appreciate everybody who joined me today. Let's see how we did. Looks like, we had a pretty decent show today. Not bad for a Sunday. I used to go live every day, and I would sometimes have 1,000 people viewing my shows. But because I am a practicing attorney and I can't go live all the time, I have lost quite a bit of viewers. So I encourage everybody to like, subscribe, share, and to purchase paid memberships so we can do back channel shows to help me to rebuild my channel. And I'm going to make a good faith effort to try to go live every Sunday and then break up the videos that I did lives on into little shorts and smaller videos throughout the week to break them up into bite-sized pieces for my viewers. Again, I definitely encourage all of you to like and subscribe, not just to my channel, and to save the videos under that ribbon for later viewing, because that really helps me out a lot with the channel. But to subscribe to Maneko64, Mario's channel. He does a live Q&A show on Sundays. Super cool dude, Austrian School of Economics, critical thinker, gold and silver stacker. To me, he's got the best channel right now on YouTube. Then obviously, I really like Sal over at Salivate Metals. I encourage you to also support his channel. But let me just see here. Lenny Malley says, free men and women don't ask for permission, only slaves do. You got that right, brother. And then Lack the Silver Stacker says they have twisted the Nazi story, I'm sure. Well, yeah, I mean, Hitler was a socialist. He ran as a communist, I believe, in the state of Bavaria. And the Nazi Party was closely modeled after the Soviet model. But if you go to a public school or a college, they'll say that the Nazis were right wing. Nazis were socialists. They'll say, oh no, the Nazis privatized. The Nazis had SA members at these private businesses controlling the means of production. I mean, what you learn in the public schools and the colleges is total bullshit. It's revisionist history. It's not real. So don't believe anything these guys tell you at all. It's all nonsense. So yeah, definitely, I agree with that. Ryan Doyle says stack silver, gold, and lead. Yeah, well, these S&W 500 rounds, they're a little expensive, but yeah, definitely recommend you do that. I'm more of an AR-15 guy and 1911 guy myself, but I just sometimes I like to throw out a few cannons so I can have something to stack my gold against, so you guys can have some fun looking at it. But yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and just close out the show now. But hopefully you guys enjoyed your journey today. I went, I think, more than 2 hours. So let's just close it out. Central bankers have been funding Bolshevism to strip assets for generations. The evidence shows that international banking interests funded the Bolshevik asset seizures and nationalization, the same pattern repeating as China rises. The Fed stabilizes the economy, the defense will argue in rebuttal. They'll argue that the COMEX provides liquidity. They'll argue that China ties are normal trade. Education is for equality, and there's no manipulation proven. They always say that you can't prove voter fraud as they pack the courts with judges from their political ideology who will never let the evidence come out. And they'll say, oh, there's no voter fraud. You don't know what you're talking. Misinformation, disinformation, is we're all going, how is it that, 200,000 votes in the middle of the night just showed up in a postal truck and that's not manipulation? Or we catch it on videotape that lifelong Democrats who are counting votes pull out boxes and boxes of ballots from under tables, caught on closed circuit camera. And that same woman who did that gets the Presidential Medal of Freedom from Joe Biden. Give me an effing break. Now let's talk about plaintiff's rebuttal and closing argument. That's me. The time-stamped evidence above that I've shown you today destroys every defense that could be produced by the COMEX and the Federal Reserve. This trial today proves systemic fraud, theft of your wealth, the war on critical thinking, the great paper destruction, and the active transformation of America into a digital communist-style system through China ties and central banking powers. We the people have proven our case. I submit that you, the jury, should award full damages and disgorgement and demand a complete audit and physical delivery of all gold and silver and end the paper markets, as well as an audit of the Fed. Stack physical gold and silver because you alone need to be able to be in control. If you don't hold it, you don't own it. You need to be outside this rigged system. Review every single clip linked in this broadcast today on your own. Make sure to like and subscribe. Comment what your verdict is below. Is it guilty or not guilty? I want to see it in the comments. And don't just put it in the comments from this live. Put it in the actual comments of the video that we did today. Liberty or digital collectivist control. The choice is yours. The court is adjourned, but the fight for sound money, critical thinking, and natural law continues. God bless America. Let me see what the comments have to say. Do we got a guilty or not guilty? Let's see what we got here. That's right. David James says it best. David James Flood 7289 says, become your own bank, stack gold and silver. Shotgun Susie gives me a guilty verdict. All right. So far, I got a guilty verdict, guys. Oh, David James gives me a guilty. Lenny Molly, how you doing, Lenny? He says lead and good hemp rope. Yeah, his verdict is lead and good hemp rope. I'm loving this, man. I love all these patriots on my channel. Become your own central bank. Yeah, right. Become your own central bank, says Ryan Doyle. All right, guys. So I'm going to close it out. I'm going to go get some chow. Lenny says they're all guilty. Guys, I really appreciate that you joined me today. Thank you for supporting my channel. Thank you for the super chats. Thank you for the paid subscriptions. Thank you for the likes. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. Very important to the algorithm that this show gets out there. Every time you buy bulk subscriptions, like 5 or 6 subscriptions, it goes out to other people to let them know about my channel. We might be able to recruit more people into our critical way of thinking. And that's the goal here, for me to build an audience of critical thinkers and emissaries and missionaries and mercenaries for free thinking. I don't do this because I'm trying to make money off YouTube. I'm doing this because I want to make this country a better place for my children. Yes, it's a greedy thing. I want my children to have a better world, and I want you to help me do it. And in return, I'm going to help you protect your children and your futures. Shotgun Susie says she needs to talk to me. Shotgun, you got my contact info, but I'm going to tell you right now, I am burned out and I still have to prepare for a trial tomorrow. So let's make it later on this evening, but shoot me an email. And with that being said, guys, make sure to like and subscribe. Make sure to save, because we never know when the thought police are going to take down this channel, and they will. They will. Trust me, these social media companies do not like people like me, and they will do everything they can to throttle the algorithm to make it harder for people to find channels like mine. Make no mistake about that. They do not want critical free thinkers in this country. We are their sworn enemy because they are socialists, and they believe in absolute control, collectivist control over the mind. Just like Logan's Run, just like George Orwell's 1984, which is ironic because George Orwell was a socialist, but later in life, he came to the realization that socialism and communism absolutely were the enemy of man. So guys, with that being said, again, I really appreciate you guys coming here today. God bless you guys. Semper Fi, do or die.